Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm actually going to call the Nantucket Regional Transit Authority meeting to order. Is there any public comment strictly on Nantucket Regional Transit Authority that is not otherwise on our agenda? If not, we'll move to approval of minutes from May 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then approval of the revenue anticipation note.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any questions? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Paula.
Hey, thanks. Have a good night.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. All right, I'd like to call the meeting of the County Commissioners for July 24th to order. We'll see if we can beat the last meeting in time. Announcements: County Commissioner meeting is being video and audio recorded. Is there any public comment tonight for the County Commissioners meeting? Seeing none, there's no new business. Can I have approval of minutes and payroll and treasury warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. No business. Any other comments, commissioners? No. Matt, anything? Nothing? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, I think I won.
Okay, now I will call the July 24th Select Board meeting to order. I think that we have a couple of additional announcements that we're going to add, and we were going to, the minutes of May 1st are not ready, so those will be stricken. And we're going to move the Independence Day fireworks forward. We do those after announcements? Okay.
So for announcements, this meeting is being video and audio recorded. We have some informational sessions coming up regarding the 2020 plastics ban implementation. As people may or may not recall, at last year's special town meeting in October, the town meeting approved a ban on certain single-use plastics for commercial sale and distribution. And we are having some informational sessions about that on Monday, May 29th at 2, Tuesday, August 13th at 8 a.m., and Thursday, September 19th at 6 p.m. in this building in different rooms, and there's a lot of information about it online already.
Libby, are those pretty much the same? You're just doing them at different times so more people can come? Or
Thank you,
do they
yes.
build on each other?
They do not really build on each other. They are pretty much the same session, meant to allow for differing times that people can attend, although we probably will be learning from every session, and at some point we'll probably kind of revamp it a bit as we move into the fall and winter to address the feedback concerns that we've got. And we have a lot of ideas about getting information out and about trying to help businesses comply. It's not the intent to punish anybody, at least not right off the bat, and to really try to get them to comply is the goal. So again, lots of information coming up. This flyer that is shown here has our logo that we developed, Act Without Plastic, and we're going to be using that on a lot of it's kind of our brand for this campaign. Christy and Rita, by the way, are on our little internal group to work on the public outreach. The next board meeting is Wednesday, August 7th, regular board meeting, Wednesday evening meeting. And we have two announcements that came in after the agenda was published. One, I think our housing specialist is going to give regarding safe harbor, and you can say what that means.
Thank you for the opportunity. Tucker Holland, housing specialist. Just wanted to share with the community that the Department of Housing and Community Development last week approved our request for certification of our housing production plan, which effectively means they have certified our plan for 2 years of safe harbor with respect to 40B projects that may be presented to the town in the future. So this has been a top priority for the select board and town administration and so forth. And I just think it's, you know, something worth noting. So thank you all for your support and keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's really good news.
It's great. Great.
Thank you. A lot of hard work went into that. Our final announcement, Chair.
Oh, yes, we have other good news. The Lieutenant Governor was here on Friday, and we had a little ribbon cutting ceremony for the Pulpus Harbor dredging. And then we accepted a $500,000 grant for the dredging by the town pier that will be happening in conjunction with the reconstruction project on the town pier and the building of the new Harbor Masters building. So it was very appreciated and exciting. And
Great.
so that's it for announcements. This is the public comment portion of our agenda for something that's otherwise not on our agenda for discussion.
What's that?
Hi, Megan Perry. I'm sure many of you already know this, but we have Nantucket Tipping Point has filed and petitioned to become a third party at the HAC appeals. And I'm just looking to see if we could get support from this board in the form of maybe a letter sent to HAC supporting us being a third party at HAC. Is that something you guys could consider?
When is it due?
Well, the judge has asked for documents to be in on Friday.
This Friday.
It's not on our agenda.
Yeah, that would need to be something on the agenda, I would imagine.
Is that something you could discuss maybe in executive session tomorrow?
It wouldn't be properly
It's
posted.
not on the agenda.
Can the chair add it at your discretion?
For something that's not reasonably anticipated. It really should.
It should be posted.
This is town council here.
Even if it's an executive add-on? Okay.
And I don't want to get too into the particulars, but I believe we have to defend the appeal in favor of the zoning board, which the appeal is against as well.
Yes,
So it would-
so Nantucket Tipping Point would be coming in as a third party with the town of Nantucket. So we would be continuing to help the town of Nantucket in this venture.
Is
I don't
that,
believe that that's what's been filed.
yeah, my understanding is that there's an appeal against the zoning board. So would those two be in conflict, or is the appeal against the zoning board?
So the HAC appeal right now is Surfside Crossing against the zoning board. So the town of Nantucket and Nantucket Tipping Point is asking to come on board with the town of Nantucket and help defend the ZBA's decision.
Oh, so is Nantucket Tipping Point dropping their appeal?
The Nantucket Tipping Point is looking to be a third party at HAC.
This is sort of confusing to us,
Yeah.
and it's coming in not as an agenda item with no information. So
Okay.
I don't know if this is different from the appeal that Tipping Point already filed.
I think you might be talking about Superior Court, not HAC. Is that what you're in reference to? So HAC and Superior are very different.
Okay, I don't think we have enough information, but I don't.
Megan, can you
anyway.
be in touch with me tomorrow?
Sure,
And we'll
of course.
talk this through.
That'd be great. Thank you guys very much.
The one
Appreciate
other
it.
thing that would be helpful is if there's anything that you have that would provide a basis for standing. That's something that's come up quite a bit with the different parties. So if you have
Sure.
something that provides your basis for standing as a third party.
Sure, I can give you the appeal that we filed with HAC, and that states all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the standing, from their perspective, I think the standing is important. And then I think figuring out, in which venue and how how we can help and you can help, I think is it's hard, you can't do that in public comment in front of the camera right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, for something like this, I need to see it all on paper. I need to do a lot of reading. We need to having
I don't mean to bring it up last minute. It's just that they had their first meeting on Tuesday and the judge requested more information by Friday. So there really wasn't, by Tuesday at 5 p.m. is when I was notified. So there really wasn't much time otherwise to try to get it on an agenda item. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Well, if you talk to Dawn and she can change town council's mind, maybe it will be discussed.
Good evening, Janet Schulte, Director of Culture and Tourism, to remind you and members of the community that we are in the midst of our celebration of Herman Melville's 200th birthday, which is August 1st. So there are lots of activities going on. You can find the brochure at Visitor Services and a variety of the nonprofits with which we collaborated, including pop-up reading stations where if you take a selfie of yourself and send it to us, it gets on our screens and you can be eligible for a gift card from Or the Whale or Queequegs. So, and I'm happy to let you know that there will be a free screening of In the Heart of the Sea on August 12th, which is the 200th anniversary of the sailing of the whale ship Essex. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Is there any other public comment? Why don't we take up the fireworks for next year now?
Well, at your last meeting, there was some discussion about follow-up from July 4th, and I think it was put forward from town admin with police and culture and tourism that we are in a position so that the fireworks could go back to the 4th, and you all had some discussion about that and decided to put it on as, it wasn't a specific agenda item the last time we talked about it, so it was asked to be a specific agenda item. So the matter before you, I guess, would be, do you want to go back to fireworks being on July 4th, 2020, which is a Saturday?
Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's probably my fault this is here. I just wanted to have a conversation. I think what I see happening business-wise on the island is I see the busier times are busier, sort of Saturday, Sunday, and peak weekends are busier, and the sort of weekdays and the off-peak times are sort of soft. They're less busy. Some, the busy businesses are still doing all right, but the medium and middle and the lower are taking quite a hit. And I think the reasoning for that is that we have built so many tourist homes that they no longer have to, sort of spread themselves out into less desirable weeks or weekends. They all come when the weather's nice, and for the 4th of July, for the first 3 weeks in August, and for weekends, and the other days are not what they were. And so I just wanted to have a discussion about sort of part of what has worked. It's an inadvertent advantage of what we've done is we've spread 4th of July the last couple of years into a 10-day holiday, and I'm afraid if we push the fireworks and the activities to Saturday, we're going to push it back into a weekend, or into a 1 week. We've had about 10 days of business that's kicked off the season for quite a lot of people. And so I just wanted to have that discussion.
I would agree with you that it has been extended, but I think a lot of it has to do with the actual people having the 4th of July off and it being during the week. I like for the local population to be able to put it back on the 4th, because I think there's a lot more people who just haven't even been able to make it to them because it ends up being a work night that it's not on the others, or something like that. But with it being a Saturday, I would think that it would kick into a week. The week following would be people's full vacation week if they're making it a full week.
In this case, with July 4th being on a Saturday, and if we kept it on the Sunday, I think either way, it's just going to be the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Or the Friday even.
Right, it's going to be the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
We did talk a little bit today in the agenda meeting about the concert that they've been doing on the 4th in lieu of the fireworks. Maybe they could do that on Friday night, which would at least extend it more through the weekend.
I just think it's important to rethink that we as a board are cognizant of, positive impacts or negative impacts that we have for, sort of unforeseen consequences sometimes. And, if we move it to the 4th, we see what happens. If the party comes back and we're back here. If it doesn't work for other reasons, we're back here. you know, and most of the Highlanders I know are so busy working during that period that they don't really go anyway. But that's, you know, the industry I'm in. But
I think it'll be interesting too because it is a weekend to see. We've had it 2 separate days for several years now. So putting it back on one day to actually test whether or not this decreasing the party has a lasting impact or not. So on the weekend. So I think sort of looking at, you know, the result of what we were trying to solve for in the first place, see if it actually has any impact, would be beneficial.
Right.
We'd be happy to move the concert probably to Sunday night, because we already do one on Sunday nights, but we could probably do a Friday, have the fireworks, and then have another concert on Sunday. The Lodging Association has been very clear with me that they would like to see everything on the 4th, the Main Street activities, Children's Beach, and the fireworks. They find it's a better package for them to sell.
Okay.
And if our public safety officials and departments are fine with it all being on one day, I don't think it's going to hurt business overall, Matt.
not for that week, probably not. But we'll see.
With this particular setup.
This week it might not, but in the
Yeah.
future,
Yeah.
in the future it may or may not. But
Yeah, I think with it falling on a Saturday, it makes sense to keep them together, and I think it really will test if we've been able to reduce the excessive partying on the beaches when it falls on the weekend. But as it moves back into being in the middle of the week, it might be worth kind of reevaluating to help businesses having it on 2 days. But I really think we should focus on having the fireworks before, because families have trouble getting off work the day after a holiday to bring children to the fireworks. And I think that we should be trying to help our year-round population in that sense.
And we're already getting calls about when they're going to be next year.
Okay, well, we're going to decide right now.
I'll make a motion to keep the fireworks on the 4th for this upcoming year.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. We do not have minutes, so approval of payroll and treasury warrants.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then we have a number of contracts. Are there questions, comments? Motions?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Yes.
And my only question on the contracts was Hazen and Sawyer 423 for engineering bidding. Is that a percentage of that, of what we're doing there, or is that based on time and hours, or? It was sewer for Aurora Way and Airport, pump station.
This was their proposal for OPM services for these pump station upgrades. And, Brian, could you
Brian's-
explain?
This is based on time and effort. It's not a percentage of anything. So they detailed out how much time through all of those that they would need to get through.
So for both of those, they did not.
For Aurora and Airport pump stations, yes.
Madam Chair, I have a quick question on the top two, the Victor Brandon and Cobo, 4 million, 2 million, for the same thing, contract for annual townwide paving and road work. Is that bidded out differently?
No, so we put it out, and typically we only get one response, which is typically Victor Brandon.
Yeah.
Cobo Utility did bid on the entire piece. What we're really doing with that is it's going to be more than likely that the majority of the work that Cobo is going to be doing may be some of the brickwork and handwork. The pavement cost is not competitive in their bid for us to really use. It's almost, I think it's more than double what Victor bid, obviously. So it was to give the DPW director or any other departments that needed some of that handwork and brickwork and things of that nature done a second alternative, because there's a lot of times, specifically with the DPW, that they can't get all of those types of things done because he's moving in 17 different directions. So we chose to put two contracts forward to give them some a little bit of leeway to be able to get the stuff done.
I think that's great. Smart.
I'm just going to take that vote again for clarity. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Well, you all kind of stopped in the middle of it and asked questions.
I was reading and noticing things. Sorry.
Citizen departmental request. Nantucket Holidays for Heroes is requesting a noise bylaw waiver out at Bartlett Farm.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Climbing Everest LLC DBA Boathouse, request for extension of common vic license from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m.
And I'm going to step out on this because I sell them drinks.
Okay. And that's
I would make
recused.
a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
My only comment was it was helpful in the packet that they put to the Sea Grill and other places, just to understand that other places are open for food that late and there wasn't alcohol, and so that helped me.
I would say
you
that
for
was
that.
my comment, was it's similar to other locations in that area.
Real estate matters. Let Ken lead us on this.
Ken Bogrand, real estate specialist. The first item is the license for the gas light. The NIR renovated their property, and there's a slight encroachment on town property. It gave the town the opportunity to address other issues with respect to the trash storage and access to Cole Alley. The license addresses those and gives us the opportunity to fix those issues. It was it was reviewed by REAC, and it is our recommendation, my recommendation to you, that this license be executed.
Ken, my question is just, what were some of the other issues that?
Well,
were
what happened
identified?
was is that in Cole Alley, there is a trash bin, and there were bins for the collection of garbage, and it wasn't clear where they could be and who was responsible for the maintenance of keeping picking up the garbage. And it's clear in this license that that's the responsibility of NIR. There's also a clear definition of the physical location of the trash bin and the barrels, and there's an obligation to be able to keep access open for person passage in Cole Alley.
So it really defines who's doing what.
Yes.
They have responsibility to
It
keep
is-
it
is
clear.
cl-
And
Yes,
clean.
it's clear. That's their responsibility.
If you take a look down at, there's trash bins for these guys, and across the way, there's other trash bins from the other businesses that are in the alley as well. And one thing to think about, I'm not opposed to this, but the plastic, one of the reasons that the haulers are concerned with the plastic issue is there's no space for the separation and the different things we're gonna need to do this. And so we've got to be thinking, how in the crowded downtown are we gonna fit in the necessary infrastructure for people to sort that stuff and leave it. And so we've got, this may be increasing, there may be more needs to put stuff down here or other places, I don't know. I just think, because we have to think, this is we're doing this 1 year. If this becomes an issue, how fair is it if some people have it and some people don't, and you all have to do it? I mean, those are the issues when you get to the nuts and bolts of implementing our plastic plan that are gonna really come to the front of the discussion. So,
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Did you have a comment?
I was just wondering if I could interject before you take a vote on it. I didn't
Okay,
know
I'll
it was coming
hold
up.
the vote for a moment.
I have pictures of what they were talking about. I was going to address this.
Oh, you'd have to go to the mic and introduce yourself.
Rich Cooper. I have pictures of what Mr. Bogrand's talking about. I didn't know this was coming up. I had these pictures to address the same topic, only on a different matter. And before you vote, if you're unclear, I have pictures of what he's talking about with the trash containers, the dumpsters, and all that stuff. I don't know if you want to take a look at them or not.
I think we're clear on this one, but it might be something to take up if it's something else that requires a license with Cat.
Well, where the dumpster is and the trash containers and everything, it closes Cole Alley down to a width that if you were pushing a bicycle, you can't get through it. I mean, it narrows Cole Alley down, all the way down to Cambridge Street to, I don't know, maybe 18 inches wide.
And that's with the revised location of the dumpsters?
Excuse me?
That's with the revised location of the dumpsters?
Well, the dumpsters are on Starlight side. There's 2 trash containers on the other side. Actually, there's 3 or 4 trash containers on the other side. down by Cambridge Street and narrowed it right down about 18 inches.
So are you asking for us to not approve this or just to think about it?
Pardon?
Do you want us to not approve this? Is that
Well,
your position?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you knew how narrow it was, or, I mean, it seemed kind of vague what we were.
Here, I'll pass those out. You can go to the mic.
No, it has changed, and there was a lot of work, and there was an opportunity to sort of put some of this back onto that property, but it didn't happen that way, which is fine, you know, we can do this, but I just think we're setting a precedent, and we've got to be thinking about it, that's my point.
Well, Cole Alley is, for a long time, has been the catch-all for everything. I mean, I've been down in the building department a number of times. I'm sorry about the quality, but I'm not very
okay.
techno-savvy, so.
I'm okay with it as long as this is not a, you know, the fire chief and police chief have, you know, looked at. I don't think it's some kind of hazard in an emergency. To me, it looks okay. It is tight.
Did anybody have any other questions? Continue with.
No, I suppose just a clarification of what the encroachments were. I know there are encroachments. I know we talked about windows opening at one point.
Yeah, the encroachments are on the front, not with respect to Cole Alley.
Okay.
Cole Alley was not, almost had no access through Cole Alley at all before, and this provides that there is walking access through Cole Alley.
There are encroachments.
Yeah.
So it's the stairs and the stoop. That
Stairs, trash bin.
Yeah, trash bin's 2.5 feet, the stairs are 1/2 foot, I believe. And they're new, some are existing and some are new, according to the plan.
Can I ask a couple of questions before? What is the definition of Cole Alley, as far as you people are concerned? I've been doing some research on it, and I've gone back as far as the first mention of it being open to vehicular traffic. It's a public way. For every definition that I get, it is a town road, not just Cole Alley. And my question is, why do it on Cole Alley? Why not do it on Main Street? Same thing. It's the same. It's a street. It's open a public way. People walk down it, up and down it. In 1969, there was a discussion between then Chief Wendell Howes and Andrew Lowell about opening it to cars parking. There was two guys that owned an appliance store, and they used it for parking, driving vehicles up and down it. So I guess my question is, what is the definition, as far as you people are concerned, as to what Cole Alley is? Is it a town road?
Was it ever officially closed from vehicular traffic?
It was never officially closed.
I'm asking, sorry, I'm asking the town manager or the
I'm
real
not
estate
sure.
specialist.
Are you asking?
Yes.
I'm not really sure, but quite clearly you cannot fit a vehicle down there.
to Matt's point as well, I think, to me, just sort of anecdotally, an alley there's walking, there's often a lot of storage in there. It's not a street. It's not Cole Street. It's an alley.
The definition, as far as I can find, through the Historical Association, Athenaeum, I've traced it back as far as right after the fire, Great Fire, and it's mentioned as a street, as a. It's not just a way. It's not just something that.
Well, I think that's something, that sounds like a much bigger issue. It looks like, to a certain extent, this has been used as an alley with storage. But I think that businesses' needs have been changing. And I think to Matt's point, particularly with waste, how we allow our businesses to function and have the storage for waste, as part of the bigger picture, that might be something we have to look at. That's also what you were suggesting, Matt. But
I'm suggesting it should be in the planning process when they're doing their building, and it should also be us thinking about it. If we're allowing people to store stuff out on the sidewalks or next to their buildings or in any part of the public, is that all right? And that, that's what we're sort of talking about here. I'm happy with this. It's it's a 1 year. If we have an issue, we come back. But I just think there's the bigger picture to talk about. And just sort of, if this were 6 or 8 parking spaces, this room would be full with a bunch of people ready to, kick us all off the board because we'd be taking away parking. It's kind of ironic that it's okay because cars aren't using it. But if, so.
Well, I mean, we have a member of the Roads and Right-of-Way Committee right here. He ought to be able to clear up the definition of what exactly Coal Alley is or is not. I mean, I didn't have enough time to research this. I fell into it Monday by accident.
It has generally become a practice that we do grant licenses onto town property, sidewalks and so forth, in public ways, in town, where these encroachments exist, as a way of acknowledging them. And also they are temporary because it's a grant of license.
Believe me, I'm not here to crimp anybody's business or to cause any conflict with anybody's business. It's just the fact that, for me personally, it seems like every day you turn around, there's another piece in Nantucket that's being lost, okay? And that's my major rub with this whole situation. I've been after people to clean it up. It never happens. So, I mean, if you allow it for somebody to do this in one spot, you've opened the door for other people to do it all over the place. You know, if you set a precedent here, you're gonna have to stick by it, and wherever it happens again, you're just gonna have to allow it. I mean,
I don't
you
disagree.
wouldn't allow it on Main Street, you wouldn't allow it in front of the house.
Yeah.
No,
You
we
wouldn't allow it in
wouldn't.
front of the Nobby shop. It's a street, it's a town street, and that's, you know, the rules apply for one, it should apply for all.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I disagree that we're gonna have to let anybody do it because we let Coal Alley do it. I think we look at it case by case, and if we need to have a policy, we can look at it. I'm okay with making a motion to.
We already.
I'm sorry, so pushing this forward, and then if we need to look at it this fall and winter further with roads and right of way, and we can put more time into it and understand definitions and bring it back if we need to.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And most of the time when we allow the encroachments, it's usually because they exist.
Right.
It's something that's been there on the town for, 100 years. And yeah, it's
acknowledging it.
It's acknowledged something that's been there for a long
Something's
time.
been rebuilt.
When something is worsened because of changes, then, or because of the change of, how we're doing things, then we have to that's when we should be thinking a little more about it.
Also, based on the recommendation, this will hopefully clear up some of the issues that you were mentioning about keeping it neat, whose responsibility it is. We'll see if that works, but that would be the intention.
Okay, I'm going to.
I was just going to note too that when buildings are under construction, like this building was, the building department actually requires that we have a license agreement in place. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to issue a building permit. And this establishment was allowed to get a building permit because they knew the license agreement was in the queue, was being worked on. So
I'm just going to finish the vote at this point. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. One thing I wanted to note that's unrelated, but in relationship to this particular business, I am concerned that this board approved their entertainment license without an understanding of the fact that it was not going to be soundproof. The windows have been wide open, and there's no wall anymore between what was the theater space and the outside, essentially. So I just thought that I would put that on the record, that I'm concerned that we may need to revisit that and that we're going to get complaints because it's very loud and it's very open.
We may need to revisit, but I do think it was represented to us that it would be soundproofed.
That's why I feel like there was some, that there's potentially an issue with how it was represented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought at 10 o'clock the windows were going to be closed. That was my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in their license. And I'm assuming it's not in their license because it was probably not discussed because no one understood that the wall wasn't going to be there. So
Yeah.
I just
that was
wanted to mention it
Yeah,
to
that
all
was
of
in
you
the,
while it
but
was on
that
the
was in
agenda.
their, that was in the building plans that they submitted. It was, if you looked at it, you could see the bar was taking over the middle of the building. The wall was gone. It was, they didn't hide it. It was there.
Okay. I didn't see anything in the minutes where the board, I wasn't here and the board never discussed the windows. So I thought maybe it was an oversight of not realizing that the windows were going to be directly open to the live music because the Rose and Crown isn't allowed
Right.
to have theirs. So
I think the windows that got discussed the most were the back windows, and were they going to be soundproofed enough, and were they going to be able to contain the music that way? I'm not sure that we specifically discussed the front windows, but we can look at it.
Yeah, I don't feel the Starlight opened there, so I don't think we did think about how far, those do open very wide, so.
just thought I would mention it. On to the next
The
thing.
next item is the release of an easement on Poplar Street in Surfside. In 2011 ATM, two articles approved the order of taking by eminent domain of Paper Road that went over 7 properties. This is the last of the 7 properties, and the request is to release the easement. It's been reviewed by the REAC and unanimously agreed that we should release this. It has no effect on creating additional ground cover or anything. This easement runs solely through within the entire property.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 3.
Next item is the consent to an assignment of a license previously granted to relocate a shed. This is a property out in Nantucket, and what's happened is that the parties were waiting to transfer the title to the town for a new certificate from the land court, and it is tied up there because of issues with respect to changes in the land court. The license was granted to an individual. Since the property is being sold, they need the ability to transfer the license to the person who is in fact going to now be owning the property, and the license is to transfer a shed within the property. So we recommend the consent to the assignment.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Now we go to public hearing.
Next, we'll move on to the public hearings. So I'll open the public hearing for 1A and B.
This is the order of taking by eminent domain portions of Proprietors Road in Quidnet. This is a 33-foot wide, unconstructed Proprietors Road running south from Quidnet Road, and the north goes onto Audubon land, and the taking would thus complete the acquisition that was authorized by Article 85 in the 2012 annual town meeting. The 5 parcels complete a total land area of about just under 62,000 square feet, and REAC unanimously approved this, and it completes the order of taking of the rest of the properties along this Proprietors Road.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this matter? So do we want to take B second and just B separately?
Pardon?
Do we want to take B separately? Okay. So I'll close the public hearing for A. What's the pleasure?
I just have one question. When I looked at who owned it, and it was, conservation and et cetera, I wondered, why do we even have to bother in this case?
Well, because some private individuals do own a portion of it.
Okay, so it's not, so we're not worried about the conservation or those guys. It didn't make any difference for them one way or the other.
No. Well, the thing is that it does make a difference in one sense, because in fact, if it's there, somebody technically, legally could come up and set up a food truck on it, on conservation land.
That's a good example. It's a good visual.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Then we'll move on to B.
The next is the order of taking by eminent domain of the balance of the Lincoln Avenue corner up on the cliff. These are the remaining orphan parcels that will be taken in order to regularize the affected properties on Lincoln Avenue adjacent to Lincoln Circle, and this was authorized by Article 81 of the 2018 ATM. The total area of the total parcels consists of 2,107 square feet, and this will complete the takings in the area to regularize this area. It was unanimously approved by REAC in their meeting on July 8.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this matter? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure on 1B?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And 2,
The cemetery. Sorry.
public hearing to consider amendments to the rules and regulations for the cemetery. I will open that public hearing.
Okay. The Cemetery Commission seeks approval for 2 minor language changes to clarify the rules and regulations. These changes have in fact been advertised for the number of times as required by statute, and they're fairly straightforward. The first is the definition of perpetual care. Perpetual care fund exists, but is not supported by the definition of what perpetual care is. And so those words that you see up there is the definition of what perpetual care is, so that funds given to the perpetual care fund fit within the definition of what's perpetual care. The second definition is to change the expansion of the rule on the size of memorials in Pulpit Cemetery. If there are to be 2 names on the stone needs to be somewhat wider. And so this is a change to expanding the width of the stone in order to be able to allow 2 names to be memorialized. As I say, this has gone through public hearings and has also been advertised. And so it is my recommendation that the board accept this and accept these changes to the regulations for the Cemetery Commission.
It's a public hearing.
I'm sorry, it's a public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this matter?
Alan Reinhardt, Chair of the Cemetery Commission. They seem like minor changes, but we find that there are no minor changes when it comes to regulations. So what this change does, the simple change as far as the definition of that we're trying for perpetual care here, makes it more, the funds more accessible for the work that we're doing in the various cemeteries. So this basically enables us to go to the finance department and tap those funds for some of the ongoing projects that we have for improving the cemeteries.
Is there any further public comment? Close the public hearing.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Town manager's report.
Okay, the first item is a review and update on the National Grid L8 feeder project. We have a couple of presentations on this, one from National Grid and the other from the town's engineer who has been reviewing the project with some alternatives.
Just before we get started, I believe that there's a quorum of the planning board here, and I'd just like to recognize the vice chairman to call their meeting to order. Sure. Do I need Nat to call a meeting to order as well? Probably.
Planning board would like to call the meeting to order and seek a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Thank you. Now, why don't you call the NP and EDC to order as well? Just
sorry, I didn't know who it was. I wasn't staring at the audience. Call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Is there approval? I mean, is there a motion to accept the agenda? Is there a second? All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
There's also a quorum here for a meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission, and I'd like to call that meeting to order. We did post the meeting.
Okay, great.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda? All in favor? Thank you.
Is that everyone? We don't have a quorum of the land bank, do we? I don't think so. I see two of you. Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and all members of the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, and Historic Commission. Thank you for having us here tonight and allowing us a chance to update you on our L8 reliability proposal. Tonight, the team that is here is myself, Joe Cardinal. We also have Marissa Peasy, who is helping us with any permitting issues and questions. Daniela Retz is our stakeholder management. She will be overseeing all stakeholder relations. Adam Wilding is the project manager who's not available tonight. Joe Henry from distribution planning is here. Joe is the one that looks at all of the loads as the loads on the island are increasing. Joe looks at that, and then Joe has to internally sell a project so that we can get funding for it. Fabio Santos from distribution design is more or less the man on the island that does the design for any projects that we have to do. And Steve Holgate and Brendan O'Neill are our on-island supervisors. Steve wasn't available tonight, but Brendan is here. Just a quick agenda on what I'll be going over tonight. Obviously, we're here to talk about the proposed L8 and the planning that we've been ongoing with the town and our own internal planning for this project. We'll talk a little bit about the demand growth on the island, the transmission network, and the overhead proposal. History of the LA planning, and I apologize in advance for this. I'm going to add a couple of dates to this as I noticed afterwards as I was looking at it. On April of 2017 is our first meeting with the town when we made an original proposal to them that we needed to build a feeder coming out of our Candle Street substation to serve the increasing load on the east side of the island. And we were looking at building an L8 express feeder underground from Candle Street, to Milestone Road. This was an express feeder. There would be no services off of it. It would not change the existing overhead on the route. It was just for this L8 feeder to get it out to the east side of the island. We had a second meeting with the town in June where they asked us to relook at some of our options and proposals for our underground route. So we brought that back, and then we had a presentation to the select board in February of 2018, and what we discussed at that time was island ready. We discussed the proposed L8, and we discussed the proposed L1, which is coming up in the near future. We talked about the flood mitigation at the Candle Street sub where we were raising up the switchgear. We talked about the battery storage and the new generators out at the Bunker Road facility, which are ready to go into operation. And then it was in the spring of 2018 that after we had provided the town with stamp plans for the underground system, we had provided them with GPR data, and the GPR data allows everybody to see what is existing underground, all the existing water and sewer and anything else that was already in the road. So we presented all of that stuff to the town, and then in the spring they said, at this time we can't have you build an underground system in that route. There's too much work that we need to do in that route, so we can't accept underground. So a few options were presented to us for us to look at that time. One was to go under all of the existing utilities, which would bring us about 10 feet down. Another was to dredge through the harbor and get out to Milestone that way. And there was also a third proposal of putting ducts in a sewer main on the street. So we brought those proposals back. We looked at them, and I'll go into them a little bit more detail in the presentation of why those were not feasible for us. So in October of 2018, we came back to the town, which was actually the fourth meeting with the town, and let them know at that time that none of those options were feasible. And we were looking to design and go ahead with the existing proposal of overhead. Again, express feeder, which would go on the existing poles to get us from Candle Street to Milestone Road. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a public information session that was well attended, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. Then we had a follow-up meeting with town officials to go over our design proposal, and here we are before the board in this meeting. The project description and need, again, is to replace and upgrade the existing facilities between Candle Street and Milestone Road. It's the installation of a feeder called the 101 L8. Again, this is an express feeder that we're looking to build. No services offered to any customers. Just we need to get a feeder out to serve the east side of the island, and I'll explain why it has to come from Candle Street in a few minutes. The scope of this job is...
Excuse me really quick. Could you, just for the public who doesn't understand what a feeder is, what is a feeder? What does it look like? Is it a giant wire?
I'll flip ahead and then see if
I just want people to be able to picture if they're listening on the radio or at home or they're watching this, because there's a lot of public misunderstanding of how all this works. I just think
the top of the pole, the picture on the left, there's three wires. That would constitute a feeder up there, okay? The second picture over on the right-hand side, that's in circle. That would be another feeder, and that's actually the proposed, what we wanted to build. A feeder can typically serve on Nantucket about 10 to 11 megawatts worth of load. The island right now is at about 48, 49 megawatts total of load.
Okay. Sorry if I skipped ahead. I just wanted to make sure I knew.
The anticipated cost of this overhead line is about $3 million. There's no additional cost to Nantucket ratepayers. It's all part of the regular rate structure. It's socialized among all Massachusetts ratepayers as part of our capital budget. We have a budget each year that we spend on distribution upgrades, and this was part of that budget. The purpose is to ensure reliability for the island, increase the capacity on the east side of the island, and improve the switching abilities. Right now, 3 feeders that are listed down the bottom, L2, the L4, and the L7, that serve the east part of the island are loaded up. And I'll show you the ratings in a minute. And with another feeder out there, if something happened, if there was an outage on those feeders, we can utilize the LA to do switching so that we can bring customers up. Right now, those feeders being loaded, if something happened, there's nothing that we can do. We have to wait until the repairs are made. A couple of customers that are served off of them, we didn't list all the customers, just a couple. The sewage treatment on the L2, the hospital's on the L4, and the airport is on the L7. Again, they're nearing their summer capacity ratings, where we're concerned about the wire potentially failing. And what typically happens when they become overloaded is they start to sag because of all the load on it. And as it starts to sag, there's a potential for it to come in contact with the other wires on the pole. When that happens, it burns up and it falls off. If we're at a potential where it's fully loaded, then we have to wait for the load to come down before we can make the repairs, and that could extend into hours.
I must have got that wrong. So if there's more electricity going through it, it gets heavier and then it sags?
Yes.
So the more that's running through, like water, if you had a pipe and you had more water through it?
Yeah. It gets hotter.
It gets hotter?
As it gets hotter, it starts to sag. And then the problem with that is over time, if that happens a couple of times, if it happens, and when you don't have any issues, that's great. It doesn't make contact. Right. But then over time, it won't go back to where it's supposed to.
So it's not a weight issue, it's a heat issue. All right. Yeah, and things get bigger when they get hot, so yeah, all right. So it's not a weight issue as much as, okay, I got you.
Weight.
No, I'm just trying to, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is a drawing showing the demand growth. This is the entire island. As you can see, from 2008 to 2018, we went from 37 megawatts to 48.5 megawatts. And actually, we were able to check the records for Sunday, July 21st, because we knew it was a very hot day. We've popped up to 49 megawatts. And what that is in layman's terms is obviously the 0.5 megawatts, which is about 500 kW, which is like adding 125 to 150 new houses. So that additional load is what we've added onto the island in the last year. This is a drawing that shows the 3 feeders that we're talking about that are currently serving the east side of the island. As you can see, you've got the red and the blue line, dotted line that goes across the top, and you see the red and the blue feeders as they're increasing on average of about 2.8% each year, and same thing with the green feeder, which is a little bit lower. The reason why we're here for the new L8 is that they're reaching their rating level, and we're concerned. We pulled some numbers again for them. The L7, which is the blue feeder, the one in the middle, last summer it was at 86% rating, and again we pulled the numbers on Sunday, 90%. So it increased 4% over the course of the year. The L2, which is the red one, which is getting close to its high level. In 2018, it was at 94%, and on Sunday, it jumped up to 98%. The L4, which is the green one, last year was at 81%, and on Sunday, that one just went up 1 point to 82%. This is just a quick reminder of the transmission network, of how the town of Nantucket is served by 2 underground sea cables that come over from the mainland. The transmission system is owned by Eversource, and it comes into 2 substations that we own, one in Barnstable and one in Harwich, and we have 2 feeds that come over, and they both come into Candle Street. So everything that we do, whether it's the east side of the island, mid-island, or west side of the island, all has to originate at the Candle Street substation and go out from that point. The Bunker Road facility is there to actually integrate load back into the system, which we will be doing soon with the battery storage and the generators. So I'm going to jump to some of the explored options that the town asked us to look at. After they told us that they couldn't accept a typical duck bank in the street right now, they asked us to look at 10 feet down below everything. We brought that back to our standards group, and they were very concerned about doing something like that because of the fact of safety and reliability issues. What that would do is that would bring us, with our manholes, the manholes would be too far in the ground. It would be a safety issue for our employees to go inside there, and if there was ever an issue inside the manhole, of how quickly they would be able to get out. The other thing was reliability issues. It sort of sounds strange, but the further that you're down, the cables cannot, they can't release the heat as they're further down, which would cause us to actually need to add more cables in the ground if we were to do something like that. And to try to get below all of the existing utilities with opening up the ground and trying to get down that low would be extreme cost, extreme time, and extreme disruption to do that. And that, to do that would only be National Grid. That would have no bearing on Verizon or cable or any other utilities. So it would just be us digging up the street 10 feet down to put our express feeder in, which would not eliminate the existing feeder already on the street, and it would not require any of the other utilities to have put their equipment underground. We also looked at drilling through the harbor. Again, very significant cost to do anything like that. It It would require a splice in the harbor, which would impact the reliability of the feeder. There would be environmental permits that would be unattainable for the projects. We would be asked if there were other options besides coming through the harbor, and we would have to tell them, yes, there are other options. They would tell us you have to proceed with the other options besides going through the harbor. Again, it would be a significant impact into the harbor, multi-year construction where the 10-foot underground would also be multi-year construction. It brought us back to overhead, most cost-effective, quickest construction, 6 or 7 months. We can do it in one season. There will be some traffic impact, but hopefully we'll be able to minimize that with traffic details and the ongoing work. There would certainly be some additional height in some of the poles, but we'll talk about how we're going to reduce the wire size so to eliminate the visual impact. And also faster times to make repairs. You have an issue on an overhead feeder, you get to see it immediately. You can make repairs underground. You got to get underground. You got to get into the manholes, determine where the problem is. This is a look at the proposed harbor route, where up in the left-hand corner is the Candle Street substation of where you would have to go into the harbor, and then where you would have to come out on Milestone Road. Again, something that we would not be able to obtain permits for.
Yeah, the only part about that is, I looked at that and it felt, no offense, it felt a bit like a false dilemma, because if you came in on Monomoy, you could get to the same place. If you ran something right through the most ecologically sensitive part of the island, of course, there's no way it'll ever happen. If you landed further up and came down Monomoy Road, it would probably happen. If, you know, and it may not want to happen for other reasons, but I think the way it's presented, the answer is pretty clear in my mind. So, anyway.
This is a drawing showing the proposed underground route. Again, this is an express feeder. It does not put the existing facilities underground. We'd be adding about 16 manholes in this route, and basically it's a 2-season job that we would have done this. One off season would be building the infrastructure, and the second off season would be all the cable work that would be necessary. Again, this is, it's a little bit out of order, but that's just some more information on the underground going under the existing sewer and water that's in the street. And also just some information on the sewer pipe that we were asked to look at. Unfortunately, there was just not, we don't know enough about the sewer pipe. We've never done this before, where you would put conduits in a sewer pipe to try to put our system underground. It would reduce what we wanted to do, and so it reduces capacity and really doesn't get us the reliability benefits that we needed, because we needed more conduits. And this is a drawing showing the overhead project route, again, via existing facilities. When we went back and first looked at the design of the overhead, we were looking at originally changing out the majority of the poles, and there were about 71 poles in this route. And that was the first proposal that we brought around internally. It was that we were going to have to change them all out. We were going to reconfigure the pole system so that there was going to be wires on each side of the poles, and we were going to have to be careful of easement rights, overhead aerial easement rights in people's residences as we did it. We re-looked at that and said, is there another option to do that, to try to minimize all the pole chains out and the wire? And we looked at aerial cable. And what the aerial cable does, it's one cable, as I showed in the picture before, and I'll bring it up again, we showed the 3 at the top. Instead of doing that, aerial cable is one thicker cable, and it's all circular, it's all together. So it eliminates having to add 3 wires. And I'll show you a picture of an existing location that has the 3 wires and the proposed location. And I'm going to jump. That is If you look at the picture on the left, that's a picture of a pole in Nantucket with the existing 3 wires. What we would be doing in the proposed overhead route is we would be taking out those 3 wires, and we would be adding the wire on the right-hand side. The existing route is about 1.5 miles. There are approximately 71 existing poles on it. We're able to utilize 44 of the existing poles. We believe we're going to need to upgrade about 27, and 16 of them will go from the 40 to the 45 feet. All the poles will be cut and kick, which means that we'll be taking the existing poles out of the hole, putting the new pole into that hole. Again, just a little bit about the aerial cable, that it just bundles the cables together. And again, the picture of it. This is some of the ongoing work that we're doing. I believe it's on Liberty and Garden Street. It's just some of the outrigging that's needed, necessary, and you can see the picture of the background of what one pole looks like to the new pole, with the 5 feet difference in the height. Obviously, pole changeouts, double poles are an issue everywhere. Nobody likes to see double poles. So that's something that we always have to be cognizant of. And if we go forward with the project, we've got to make sure that all the utilities work together to transfer from old poles to the new poles and get the double poles out as quickly as possible, and then make any repairs to any damaged sidewalks.
While you're there, what is the status with Gardner Street? Because it's double poled right now, and it's the
Yes.
middle of summer.
Yeah, I've had a discussion with Erica on, we stopped 1 week because the traffic was very bad out there. And then I asked, did you want us to wait, or did you want us to continue on? And she was like, continue on, try to get your work done as quickly as possible and get out of there so we can get the other utilities in there to do their transfers, and then we can get rid of the double poles. Unfortunately, with every pole set, you have National Grid, you have cable, you have Verizon. I don't know if there's any fire alarm or fiber too. That all has to be done in a correct order.
What advice do you give us if that's an issue? Do you see other communities that are organize it better, that have this happen more conveniently or more coordinated?
Well, it should be coordinated 2 ways. There's an official database that what would happen was, since Verizon set area for this new LA, they were the ones that would have to do the setting of all the poles. So what they do is once they set the poles, they have to go into the database. They have to put in there that they've added these 27 double poles. And obviously, we're going to know about it, but that's supposed to be a trigger for us to say, okay, we got to get out there and we got to do our transfer work. And then once we do our transfer work, we cut the poles down to just below the street lighting, which we would own. And then next utility, if there's fire alarm on the pole, they would go next. If there's cable, then they would go next. Verizon would finish their transfers, and then we'd pull the poles. And that's all supposed to be done by the database, and Fabio will be overseeing that from day one till the time that work is completed.
Oh, you're going to have to come to the mic because it's being recorded.
I think this is a manpower issue here on the island. We don't have enough crews to be able to transfer that in a timely fashion. Verizon, same thing. So we have to bring crews offsite and also equipment. So the delay on Gardner, I can't speak for the line department, but I know from conversation it's a manpower issue. So hopefully we can mitigate on this project and prepare a little bit better because of the impact.
Well, that's what I'm asking, because if we're going to go into this and it's going to be sort of what we hear, we get complaints from the public and from neighborhoods, and we're always told, well, nothing we can do, it's Verizon. Nothing we can do, it was somebody else. And it doesn't really matter to us who it is. It's something this should be organized and done in an efficient, manner. And so I'm hoping if we end up doing this, if we end up going this method, that we have that sort of, written in blood before we start, so that it does go smoothly, and everyone that's supposed to do their work does their work when they're supposed to, and not coming back saying, oh, geez, we couldn't do it this year. We'll get to it someday.
Don't start it until everybody's lined up, basically.
I don't know what the answer is. That's why I'm
Something
asking.
like
You guys are the pros. I'm asking, how do we do this? If you were us, what would you do?
Well, what I always, we only have so much control over the other utilities. I always say that, we're here to support you, to get a new feeder out there and do this work. The other utilities should be doing the same. They're basically, they're part of the community too. They have to do their transfer work. They need to be responsible to you. We can hold their hand, but we can't force them. On this project, we're looking at having contractors do it for us, as Fabio mentioned, because of constraints and the amount of crews that we have over here. So instead of pulling crews off of doing other work, they would solely be on this job to get this work done. Verizon is obviously aware of the project. We'd have to make sure that the cable company is also up to speed, because obviously Verizon would be setting the poles since it's their set area. This is the challenges that we look at as we were looking at this project. A lot of these poles have risers on them. And what that means is they're secondary risers, they're services that go into residents. You see that this pole has 3 of them on. It's all electric, cable, and phone going into the handhole and then going under the sidewalk into the residences. It's very tough as doing this project to relocate any of these poles anywhere. So that's why we were looking to do the cut and kick method, so everything would go right back in the same hole. We'd release those riser pipes from the pole, put the new pole in, and then reattach them. If we had to move and relocate a lot of the poles, then a lot of more design would go into it, and obviously you would need the coordination, again, with Verizon and Comcast to relocate their risers. Traffic management plan. Obviously, we would be coordinating with the town police and fire before we did any work. I'm assuming you're talking on a project like that, at least 2 details. It could be more. It's going to depend on what the police department requires for the job after they would see a traffic management plan put together. On a job like this, when the poles are being set, you're looking at 2 trucks on the street back to back as they're setting the poles. So I would assume you'd have police detail on one end and a police detail on the other end. Obviously, we want to maintain at least 1 lane of travel as much as we possibly can. There probably could be some road closures on some of the smaller side streets, but obviously the police would make sure that everybody had access whenever they needed it to get into their houses. The timeline that we're looking at, you look at the timeline, you say, really, you want to get started right away and get it done in the springtime? Well, we've been looking at this now for over 2 years. We're watching the loads grow, and we're realizing we need to get this done as quickly as possible. So that's why we were looking at a condensed construction timeline that we can get it done in 1 season and get it done before the peak load of summer of 2020. Outreach will be handled by Danielle, and she'll be available for door-to-door outreach, one-on-one meetings, any more public information sessions that are needed. We have, and I'll show them on the other page here, we do have all the ways that you can connect with us. We'll be available with ads in the paper, participate in events, any questions that come up along the way. We would be available on a daily basis. What's that? Oh, you did? Okay, and there is a link on the town's page to our page. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm here, and the team is here to answer them for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think we wanted our engineer, Ziad from EPG Engineering, to just take us through the complications that the town was facing with this project underground.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that one. Yeah, that's forward. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Ziad Carey. I'm an engineer with Environmental Partners Group. I worked for the town in 2018 did the assessment and the repairs for the force main that ruptured 2018. I'm familiar to a lot of you guys. And then following that, I was asked by David Gray to do peer review for the LA project. At the time, and more specifically, the impact of the L8 project on the existing utilities, water, sewer, and drain. At the time when I first looked at the first submittal by NGrid, the proposal was to go underground. And I'll go through the timeline here pretty quick. Joe really actually covered the scope and the purpose of work, rather extensively, and he also covered the alternatives, and I'll go through them here pretty quick just to summarize them. Since today we're talking about overhead, we'll obviously look at the overhead option, the impact on the underground, the conventional cut, and then the deep underground, as Joe was mentioning. The conduit or the duct bank that is in the middle of the slide, that is a common, what he referred to as the express line, which is a duct bank that would normally be encased in concrete. It's about 32 inches in width, 25 inches high, and probably buried about 30 inches below grade. This is where all utilities typically are located within the roadway. One thing to mention, based on the review that I did, the alignment as proposed, most of these roadways actually, they vary from 17 feet. They're as wide as 17, they go from 17 feet to about 25 feet. So there's not a whole lot of room in there. I got involved in this project. I know I looked at the first submittal by NGrid. This was submitted on sometimes in August 2017. And I think they did a PowerPoint on October 23, 2018. I did the first peer review for the underground, and I issued a report basically talking about the impacts on existing utilities, quantifying what needs to be addressed, and the limitations in terms of the underground option. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. So you're showing us something that's 30-something by something, 20-something with 12 circles in it? Are those each conduits?
So this is the duct bank that would carry the entire L8 feeder, correct?
Right. So is that, are those conduits themselves?
They are conduit, and the outside would be concrete encasement.
Right, and so is each of those capable of carrying one line? So if you put something like this in, are you getting 12 lines in this?
That's the question you get.
It's able to carry more than one line, obviously, but we need spares for the one line, so maybe
Right.
up to 6, and we want to space them out for heating purposes. But
Right.
yeah, so it can carry a lot more than one.
And does it carry just electrical?
Yes, I mean
Okay.
sometimes we allow some fiber companies to rent it from us, but
So fiber can go in low voltage lines to any of the low voltage lines.
yes,
Can go along with it.
right. If you had a transformer that's feeding multiple houses or something, you can backfeed it through the duct bank.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. It's interesting to understand sort of how. All right. Gotcha.
And then last week we met here on July 16th, and then after that there was some talk about perhaps looking at a different alignment, something that would accommodate an underground option using land bank and town-owned properties. And we'll talk about that pretty shortly here. This is the first option that I looked at back in November 2018. That was the underground option. And again, a report was provided with findings. This red line would be the overhead that Joe had just discussed. And then the horizontal directional drilling that they had mentioned in their presentation at the beginning. They identified the permits, and we kind of concur that, I'm not really sure about the alignment, but we do concur that the permits are extremely extensive. You're dealing with Chapter 91, 404, 401 water quality, CZM, coastal zone management, and among others. And obviously with the FEMA flood map elevation here, all their manholes would have to be above water, raised above the water level. So we obviously didn't look into this approach. We only reviewed the underground and the overhead options.
Sorry, Saya, can I just ask, how was that route chosen through the harbor?
This was their approach. The alignment was based on what they looked into.
Okay, so maybe afterwards, I think that is a question for National Grid then. How was that harbor route chosen?
Again, they talked about the permitting component of this horizontal directional drill, and then the expense to put this line in there. The overhead wires, obviously, like Joe had mentioned in his presentation, a lot of pros on there, which is the implementation approach. You could do it in a relatively short order, least amount of permitting, and it's not disruptive because you're not digging into the ground. Aside from taking out the utility pole, maybe making the hole a little bit bigger to accept the wider one, that's the extent, and then maybe some sidewalk restoration that would be required after the fact. The cons, obviously, they were talked about. You still overhead. You're relying on overhead wires. The poles, some of them are going up from 40 to 45 feet, and then some issues with ADA compliance and limited sidewalk and bicycle usage behind between the back of the pole and the back of the sidewalk, and we'll show this shortly here. This is a random. That was a tape measure on the left side that I measured back in January when we walked the site with Rob McNeil. If the back of the brick or the back of the sidewalk does not necessarily mean it's the property line, right? So if you have 36 inches from the back of the pole to the back of the brick, a wider pole would be increased in diameter by 3 inches. 3 inches. So if you're using the same hole, 1.5 inch would have to go towards the street, and then 1.5 inch would be back towards the sidewalk. So the 36 inch will no longer be accessible, will no longer be available. So those are some of the issues today. Before this meeting, I walked the site with National Grid because we did identify 12 locations where ADA could be an issue, and based on today's discussion, he did say that, we identified, instead of 12, narrowed them down to 3 or 4, and then he said there's ways he may have to go back to the drawing boards and do some designs to make sure that he has the ADA accessibility.
Even in that picture, if you look to the next pole down, it's right across the sidewalk. So not even this one is pretty good. We'd say that, the one that we've got the tape measure on is great. You go down. It's a double pole, and it looks like it's sort of positioned quite differently. There are some that are dead center in our sidewalks.
Yeah, the ones the ones we looked at today, there are probably 3 or 4 that definitely they're an issue.
Yeah.
And then some of them he says he could bypass or he could redesign around them. This is what I was talking about, the red dots. So basically what he shared, the AutoCAD files that were done by the surveyor, their baseline survey or their baseline design. We took them, we scaled them off to the property line, and we identified 12 locations where would be an issue with ADA. But again, as I mentioned early on, the survey may not be, or the back of the sidewalk, or the fence line, for instance, may not be representative of where the actual property line is located.
So yeah, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say ADA issue, it will be an issue once the pole gets changed, or it's already an issue and we could fix it, or somewhere in between?
Well, the alignment, which consists of 71 poles, 27 will be changed out, 16 will be raised, 12 are we identified 12 as currently an issue, but we narrowed them down to 4. So they're already an issue, and if you widen the pole, they still become an issue.
So we're down to 3 that could be an issue with the changes.
Correct.
Okay.
Provided that he goes back to the drawing boards and he redo his design. So
I guess my second question is, and this might be for later in this discussion, is where are the opportunities, risers or no risers, where we can make improvements? Where can we gain sidewalk? And maybe that's not the question for right now. I just want to throw that out there. That's what I'm a little confused about.
I think if this moves forward, I think one of the comments that I had in the peer review memo on the overhead option, I think at every pole, a property line may need to be staked out in the field, actually by a professional surveyor. do the research on the property, show exactly where the property line is located, and make sure you have the 36 inches. Or if you could, sometimes the poles are located on the back of the sidewalk, not in the front. So if there is room to push it back a little further and then gain that 36 inches, maybe that would be the best way.
Right. Or gain more sidewalk because there's more room there. Keep the pole at the edge. Okay.
This figure here is also not a random figure, but it was taken at the intersection of Fayette and Union Ave, and this is a typical cross section using the conventional underground option as proposed by NGrid in the original design. So the long, Erica, do you have the? So this would be the duct bank longitudinally, and everything else is the existing utilities in the roadway. So you could see they all come together somehow. So therefore, if you have a water service or a sewer service going to a house, would be impacted by that 32-inch duct going across. That's another cross section. This being the roadway up here. And then the sidewalks, this is the proposed duct bank, which is 25 inches below grade, and the depth of the duct bank obviously would come into contact with the water service and a sewer service. And that would repeat itself just about along the whole alignment. This is a typical vault that they had proposed. Obviously, they need vaults every 400, 600 feet to be able to pull their wires and terminate their wires. A typical vault is about 14. It's about 14 feet this way and about 11 feet this way. So if you have a roadway that's only 17 feet and you put this vault in, here's your water main and that's your sewer main right there. So obviously it's not going to work in these tight roadways. This is my experience when we did the repair to the force main back in 2018. This is South Beach Street. You could see the utilities that kind of currently exist in the ground. On the left side, that's the force main that ruptured and that we repaired. The overhead lines on South Beach, there is a deep sewer line underneath here that you can't see in the picture, and everything had to be supported and sheeted, and basically have a supportive excavation to be able to repair one portion of the force main. Same picture to the right, a different location. Not to mention the groundwater, and then you could see at the very top, to be able to dig down and install anything below grade, you'd have to work in dry conditions, and that would require to lower the groundwater table by 2 feet below the bottom of your excavation. So all these well point systems were installed. This is again when we did the force main back in 2018, and the underground would, for the L8, would pretty much require the same thing. Same conditions on Main Street and along the force main alignment, which is no different than where the L8 feeder is going to go.
So you had a question, another clarification. This would be required to put everything underground or just the L8?
So,
or both?
So the duct bank that was shown in the previous slide.
With the 12?
Exactly. That would accommodate the entire L8 plus the overhead.
I would comment a lot if I didn't have to stand up over there. So the proposed duct bank for the L8 was 12, with enough space to put future feeders on the ground, which is the existing overhead. We felt that the town had a desire to put stuff on the ground, and since we're going to do all that excavation that he's pointed out, we would have extra pipes ready for that. But we would do all that and put just one feeder on the ground now and keep the existing overhead pole line. But we will be ready to have the duct bank in there. The amount of construction involved for us to add just a few more pipes for the future, it was worth doing. But to answer your question, we would not touch anything that's overhead, but we'd have space to put the future stuff over below ground. I'm gonna say here.
Wait, yeah, I have questions. So that doesn't include Comcast or any other, and they would have a similar style duct bank, smaller maybe?
I think that's what the problem is here, because on the poles we have multiple utilities and we cannot design for them. We don't know what the specs are, what the customers are. So we would design just for us. They would also have to have their own design for their own duct banks and manhole systems. And I think that's the issue here. We're gonna do all this work just for National Grid when we should be looking at all the utilities together and the town involvement, and also replace the sewer and water lines at the same time and to get everything below ground the proper way. Instead of having just National Grid, cause this mess and no real benefit to anybody else. So I think the underground kind of disappeared very fast after we studied it closely and we looked at the GPR data and see the amount of impact that would take. So the overhead is the best feasible option to get the load issue solved. And then I guess with the town and, with Zayad's help, we can look at how to study how to put everything on the ground in the future. And I think National Grid has good faith in doing that. We attempted to do that. So as long as you guys are ready to do your study, we'll be able to study and maybe install duct bank for us at the right location where it doesn't impact anything.
Are you anticipating future feeders in the next 5 years, 3 years, 10 years?
Joe can speak to that, but I don't think our substation can handle it. I think we're maxed out at 8.
Okay.
So I just wanted to go back to the slide here. This is from the survey that these guys provided me with, the CAD file. So this is just like real dimensions for the other utilities, like it's labeled as unknown size telephone line. You could see it. It's much smaller than the 44-inch that L8 was proposed to be underground. Last week, we obviously talked about, there was a discussion about is there an alternate route, can it go underground on town-owned property or land bank properties? We looked into that, and we highlighted, obviously, anything that's in blue here is town-owned, and the land bank is these parcels right here. So the fact that they're not continuous, you can't really put a duct bank underground, because you got, this is all private property here. Here it's all private property. So the land bank properties and the town properties are not really continuous for the entire alignment. Therefore, you cannot really use that to go underground. Can it go below everything else? I think the simple answer is yes, it can. How deep would it have to go? It has to clear everything else. The base of the sewer manholes, the base of the drain manholes, and everything else that's in the way, and then some distance to give separation. Can it be done by conventional open cut excavation? Sure it can, but that means you have to disrupt all the existing utilities. You have to bypass water and sewer in the process to be able to put that duct bank 10 or 15 feet below grade. Now, the vault that I showed early on, the 14 by 11 and 8 feet deep, that vault would have to be about 15 feet deep. If you want to be 15 feet deep, you're going to have to shore the entire route, and your production is going to diminish by quite a bit. So you're lucky if you could move 10 or 15 feet a day, and the roadway would have to shut down to be able to do that. Is there an alternate way to do this? I think there is, if you want to play the clip. Right there, Corey. You could right click on the... So basically, this is a method called the trenchless technology. I'm using a couple of them in a couple different communities. You dig, we're going under the Mass Pike and Route 9 to put gravity sewer. You would need a shaft. In this instance, where their proposed manhole is going to be located, that would be the location of that shaft. And then with a jack, which that's what you see there in the inside of a manhole, you push that pipe in, and then you mine the soil out. And then a pipe would be left in place, and that pipe would accommodate a duct bank. I know it's pretty long if you want to skip through it. In this instance, because of the high voltage power, this hose pipe will not be ductile iron pipe, would be some sort of a plastic or a PVC pipe to be able to act well with the electrical conduit. And then the annular space after the duct bank is installed would have to be encased in concrete. And then you're not digging the roadway. All you're digging is probably about every turn you have to dig a shaft to be able to push a pipe through. So if they had proposed 16 manholes along the entire alignment, at a minimum, you probably need about, there is a way a microtunnel could do a curve because it's all laser guided. Again, the production, you look at the cost, on average, it's about $3,000 per linear foot. This is only to put the tunnel through and doesn't include the electrical conduit or any of that stuff. And then if you were to do it, but if you were to replace the utilities above it, take the island factor here, drain, water, and sewer, you're looking at $750 per linear foot per utility. So overall, you're probably looking at $50 million to do this stretch.
And so you're saying it's 50 million to do everything, to take the existing and put it underneath, build the tunnel big enough so everything would fit in it, and go underneath and do that.
The tunnel will only
the water
accept
sewer.
the electrical because their duct bank is, what did we say? 34 inches by 25 inches. So a 60-inch sleeve would be acceptable. So the sleeve would have to be 60 inches. You'll tunnel that. You put the electrical duct bank through it. You'll encase it in concrete. And then the rest of the utilities, you're not really digging anything above.
Right.
You could either leave the utilities if they're functional, or if you want to upgrade them, you could upgrade them at a later date.
Are there bigger duct banks? Do people do larger? Like if you're in New York City, you're doing a big,
Absolutely.
huge tunnel.
Yes.
Okay, that's all right. Gotcha. Yeah.
And Sai, can I just ask, is there any reason for concern when those sort of duct banks are in areas where there's regular flooding or future flooding anticipated?
This is more of a question to them if you're going underground.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you want to answer that question. But.
Well, the cables underground, the splices in the manhole can take the flooding. The issue would be if we if we are going to put the existing overhead construction on the ground, otherwise it'd be below ground, but we have to find locations for transformers. So we changed the voltage from 13,000 volts to 120 to 40 to feed a house. We need to put a transformer that's now attached to a pole. We need to find a location on the ground to put that. We're not putting those inside manholes. We're putting those on somebody's property. And that's kind of the issue. We need to study where to put this stuff. Those transformers need to be raised up 1 foot above flood levels. So we need to raise all of that, and you can visually see that. If you look at a couple of spots on the island, you can see the transformers are raised. Every single transformer that we install, we have to be like that to standard now. So what he's saying is the stuff in the manhole and the pipes can't take the flooding, but the equipment can't. So.
And so in the future, if we're going to be seeing sea level rise of 4 feet in the next 50 years, you're going to have to raise all those 4 feet,
that.
5 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
But maybe the customers will go away because they can't live there. So.
They're not making any moves off the island yet.
So would that duct with the tunnel accommodate Verizon
Well, this
and
is
Comcast?
this is a discussion that would have to happen between Ngrid and Verizon. I'm not really sure if the two utilities could.
Let me just comment on the tunnel option. It's an amazing idea, and I think it would work if we're gonna keep the existing infrastructure like the sewer, the water lines, the way they are now, and we're trying to avoid all of that, and we go underneath. But as we said before, that going below everything at 10 feet doesn't work for our electrical system. It derates the cable, we can't dissipate the heat fast enough. So we can't even do that, even though it sounds amazing, we can't do it. I think the intelligent way to do this, if you guys really want to get rid of the poles and have beautiful sidewalks on certain streets on this route, it would be to open up the streets and for all the utilities to put their duct banks in the correct location. And we study this properly. I know the sewer needs to get replaced, the water needs to get replaced. Everybody could benefit by replacing together, and we can put it away from each other. That's the best
So,
way, and it's cost effective.
If we can set that up, which I know is going to take some time to organize all of that, say you did move forward with this L8 overhead, but then we, in the meantime, get all of this organized to do everything at once, will National Grid at that point commit to moving all their wires underground?
I think that's a question for the money man.
I mean, we're always open to the option of moving the wires underground. That's something that we're more than willing to do. But based on our rates, typically when we came in to look at this L8, normal strategy is that we come and say, we're building it overhead. And the town says, no, we want it underground. But because it was Nantucket, we decided to make the proposal first to build it underground, and we were gonna basically eat the extra cost that it was going to take to build this underground. In normal cases, we charge the difference between the overhead and underground. If the overhead is $3 million and the underground is $10 million, we have to charge it $7 million because it goes against all the ratepayers in the state. So basically, we have to recoup the costs of the underground so that we're not putting a burden on other ratepayers. So
But
basically, the
in
quick
that
question
underground proposal, it was still only the L8 and none of the other wires. I
Correct.
just want to make sure that that's
yeah, we were
completely
gonna, like Fabio said, the
understood.
duct bank was going to be large enough. We were going to throw in extra ducts so that down the road, if you decided to move the existing stuff underground, the duct bank would already have been there, and we were going to do that option, and then you would have had to pay to have everything underground at that time.
In your example, the 10 million and 3 million, that 7 million difference, that would go to the ratepayers on Nantucket, or that would go to the taxpayers? Who? 'Cause I
Well, it can be
understand-
done. It could be done. The town of Nantucket could pay the difference. There could be a bylaw passed where the ratepayers pay a surcharge on the electric bill. That was done at one point here to underground the downtown and ensconce it.
Okay.
Those are basically the two options.
Okay. I can make just a quick comment that it's been very helpful just to understand the magnitude of, and just seeing visuals of how we could put everything underground, and just the difficulty of putting just L8 underground. And so I understand why this is, I hope this helps the public and the board and everyone here understand how we got to today.
And this is just the last slide. If in the perfect world, an underground. Oh, sorry. This is the duct bank that they had proposed. It would have to be about 10 feet or so to clear everything else.
So I can jump in if you don't mind. About the pole, I wanted to mention when he was talking about the poles and the sidewalks, ADA, and there were the poles that we did find the potential issues. Yeah, if you go back to that. So he identified 12 poles based on the survey that we provided. For some reason, they didn't match when we walked, and we only found 3. That was a complete issue. And he did mention that most of these poles are not compliant now. I don't know what the regulations would be, but I believe he said that the minute we touch it, we have to make it compliant. So if we don't touch those poles, which some of these poles we're replacing just due to age, it's our standard to once we touch a pole at this 30 years old, we replace the pole. And the only poles that Verizon carries now it's class 1 and class 2s because of wind storm hardening standards, and those classes are a little bit wider than the existing class 4s. So if we do replace those poles, we have to be either class 1 or class 4s, or increase, the diameter of the pole. And in that case, we'll violate, if you don't have the clearances now. Now you're touching that pole, now you have an issue. So we're gonna look into those 3 locations to see if we don't have to replace those poles, to avoid touching the poles. Yeah, but we did identify one pole that we have to replace, and there is an issue. But the sidewalk itself is not even 36 inches, so I don't know how we're gonna look at that. So how can we be forced to have a 36 inches if the sidewalk is 28 inches? So we have to study that a little bit. We're hoping that we can solve that and get this thing going.
Maybe there's opportunities where the right-of-way extends further, where the sidewalk could be widened.
Correct, yeah, as long as it doesn't stop us. We can do this later, but I believe so. I think you guys have to study the sidewalk issue. It's important. For me, as a person walking here after work, it's uncomfortable. So.
I think I just want to make sure that we can look at every possibility to make improvements on every pole, even if some of the cost for Verizon or whatever has to come for the town. At least, I don't know where that money would come from, but I'd like to at least explore that and try to figure out. It's the easiest way. It's easier to move a pole, even though I know it's hard engineering wise with risers and everything, than to try to build a sidewalk further out to the road. Or it's just, we're gaining sidewalk. There's opportunities. I just want to make sure that we're not skipping anything. And I don't want to hold the project up a full another year. So I don't really know how much engineering we have to do. Does the town have to hire a surveyor, or what else has to happen to make sure we're grabbing some of these opportunities? Right? Because it won't be for another 30, 40 years, or unless we put everything underground to gain more sidewalk.
You gonna say something?
I'll go after you.
I think the issues we need to look at is just for those 3 poles. We're gonna look at it closely to see if we can avoid replacing them altogether, if we can meet our standard that we need for this new wire, and the weight of the wire and the class of the pole and the age. Hopefully we don't have to touch the poles, and then we can study the sidewalk together. I'm hoping that you guys actually, because I know from listening to the conversation and talking to the sewer department, the water department, the lines on those streets and that routes have to be replaced eventually. So if you guys are going to be ripping up those streets to do that, I think there's a huge opportunity for you guys to put duct bank, for us to join you guys and do a duct bank on those streets and remove the poles altogether from that route. That's my hope.
That's what we want to say. Or that's what I
Correct.
want to say. I shouldn't say we.
But that's going to take lining up the sewer and then the water department and the DPW, the drainage and all that, and some studies involved in doing that. And then National Grid, Verizon, and Comcast. I don't think National Grid and Verizon would be an issue at all. I think the issue is going to be, the sewer location and the gravity and all that. They take precedence. And I think that's a good thing that we are not going in front of them, putting our huge duct bank in. And then later you guys decide to replace those lines and we have this huge duct bank in the wrong location. So you guys should be able to put it first and tell us where to go. I think that's a benefit there.
But
Is that clear?
Yeah.
I think it's also important to note that obviously our engineering is done. I mean, we might have to move the proposed duct bank to one side of the road or the other side of the road, but the money that it takes to do the engineering has already been completed. We provided the town with the GPR data, so it obviously allows them to see what's existing there. So that part of it, from our standpoint, is done and out of the way.
Can I just ask about sort of the urgency of the L8, and that it sounded like at least two of the 7 other feeders were in the 94%, 98%. At what point do you start considering another feeder, and how urgent is this feeder?
Well, we first made the proposal to the town, it was almost 2.5 years ago, and Joe, you can tell us how long you was studying beforehand to come up with the original underground design that we looked at.
Yeah, so I did a study back in 2014, and I look at the load growth, and I saw in 2018 that I'd be nearing 100% on some of these feeders. So anytime we're over 90%, we get a little nervous with, you know, the risk of the line burning down. In this case, it's even more difficult because you got all 3 feeders that feed on that one side of the island are all loaded up. You know, one's at 100%, one's at 97%, the other at 88%. So if something happens, you have no capacity to pick anything up. So it puts us in a bad situation where we can leave customers out for long periods of time.
Based on, if this is the last feeder that our substation can handle, and based on the growth rate that you've been seeing for Nantucket, how long does this feeder last us before we need, is it that we would need a new substation?
Well, we have the next project, which is the L1, which is utilizing a feeder that doesn't have, it's not being used that much right now. It's only lightly loaded. So we're going to use that feeder more. So that's another avenue. And that would be it for that substation with the 2 supplies to it now. And we have enough distribution capacity to serve the island with the supply that we have. Eventually, when we need the 3rd supply, it might go Candle Street, it might go somewhere else on the island. We'll need more feeders and more routes, but if that new supply went to Candle Street, then we need more feeders out of that same area.
Can you explain how the batteries improve the whole layout?
How the battery improves the what?
Does the battery tie into this in terms of charging them and?
Yeah, I mean, so the battery and the CTG are mainly for supply concerns. We have a outage on one of the supply lines. The battery and the CTG can turn on and pick up the rest of the load. Without this L8 circuit during the peak times of the year, it's difficult to recharge the battery because there's not a lot of off-peak time. You can only charge it from like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and you need like at least 8 hours or so. So with the L8, you actually gain more capacity to that side of the island, so we can charge the battery easy and use the battery to its full use.
And then, so if we add the L8 and then utilize the L1 more significantly, are we good for another 10, 15, 20 years? Or what is there a time frame on that?
Yeah, so I think the forecast now what is it? I think the original one was 2029, but then we put the battery in so we can push off the normal overloaded supply lines. So hoping that pushes off another 10, 15. 10 to 15. Yeah, it's, you know, we're running, but so at that point we're peak shaving the total load on the island with the battery. So, and especially at that point, you definitely need this L8 circuit to recharge the battery at night because everything's going to be loaded up, and we're right on the cusp of needing that 3rd supply cable.
Thank you.
Yeah,
sounded
so
like
I know
2040 something, I think Lauren has said.
2044.
So this L8 is key in pushing that off then?
Right.
So here's a question. You guys are willing to put it underground originally, and it's 32 inches, the duck bank, et cetera. How, and maybe it's not for you, but it's for our town. What is underneath our sidewalks? Do we have sewer and other stuff under the sidewalks?
You don't have major infrastructure under the sidewalks. You just have I think they have handholds that kind of run the services for electric, but the water and sewer, whether it's the force main or gravity sewer, they're located within the roadway.
They're all in the roadway. So is there an option of putting this under the sidewalks?
Well, we talked about that last time we spoke. You know, if you could dedicate the sidewalk, perhaps. I think one thing needs to happen if there's an appetite to go underground. The vaults that they had proposed, they may have to be reconsidered. In other words, make them elongated versus. See where? Yeah, right here. So in this dimension, they're about 14 feet. I don't know if there's a way you could make them rectangular. So this is 14 feet this way and about 11 feet this way. They may have to make them a little bit longer in the long run and then shorter in the width, right? So that way you could put in water, sewer, and anything else. And not to mention, water and sewer need to be separated by 10 feet within the roadway.
So if you use the sidewalks
Ideal
now or down in the future, use sidewalks for one thing and the roadway for another thing and do it all at once.
Yeah, you could technically take this vault and then set it up close to the property line on one end, offset it in the roadway, and would allow enough space within the roadway to accept water, sewer, and drain. That's one way to do it.
So
But then
long-term.
you're gonna have to rely on the poles. The poles are already on the sidewalk, so you either have to hold them while you do this, and then not to mention, I mean, this is gonna be time consuming.
And one thing that we were worried about with the sidewalks was the trees. That would impact all the trees along those corridors.
Yep, on one side, if you pick one side or the
On
other.
one
you
side,
know,
yes.
I have a couple of comments. So just with talking about moving the different pole locations, are you saying that there's a commitment from National Grid to look at moving some of those poles? Because I think, in the last several years, our downtown area has expanded. One of the select board strategic goals is to make it more walkable, bikeable around town. So is there any consideration of moving some of these poles?
I guess my question is what poles are we looking at? I know that the town had come back to us, and I think the number was originally 12 that were an issue that we've looked at, and we've got it down to just a couple. If there's any specifics that you want us to look at, we can certainly look at. Again, we're sort of limited when you see a lot of rises on them, but Fabio can certainly look at any pole that you have a question on. We don't want to move one that we're going to come into non-compliance with the ADA either, and if we want to make sure that we stay in compliance as much as we possibly can, and we're very tight. Once we go out of the public way, obviously if you go into a private residence property, then we're going to need to obtain easements, and then if we start changing the route and moving it a little bit, then you're looking at possibly supporting it, which also would mean guy wires on private property too. So if there's any specific polls, there's questions different than the 12 that had originally came up, certainly let us know and then we can take a look at them.
Okay, and then my other question was just kind of looking at the future of Nantucket. We've talked about sea level rise. Is there any way to start underground and then come above ground, just thinking about coastal resiliency?
Well, engineering will tell you they don't like doing partial underground. They want to do the entire feeder underground at once.
But they don't like it. Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible.
So has that been looked into at all?
For this project, doing part
Yeah,
of it
keeping it underground downtown near Washington Street and then bringing it above ground?
Well, that was the original proposal that we had on board, was that we were going to come down a section of Washington Street and then cut to the town property, I believe it's at the parking lot. Yeah, and that was, we were told that, again, that's obviously an area that the town's not ready yet with their existing work that they need to do.
Okay.
So,
thanks.
I did, so I was in a 2-hour meeting on this last week. And I did ask about whether we could work together for any kind of easements that might help improve any kind of sidewalk access. But it's something we would need to work on really quickly to meet what their timeline is. Did you want to say something? I was going to see if, I think there's a lot of interested people here who might want to make comments or ask questions. I'd be happy to take some public comment at this time.
Hello, John Trudeau, Planning Board. First, I'd like to say thanks and appreciate everything that the Select Board is doing to host National Grid and make this into a public discussion. We have a few concerns, and they're really just kind of basic. The interest of the town is at heart, obviously, and we want to protect the town's historical character, foster accessibility and mobility, assure that the infrastructure is adequate and to withstand the climate change, and facilitate cost-efficient action that minimizes disruption. We would like to work with the town administration and National Grid. We would really like to work more closely to come up with a better proposal as far as, and we recommend something for consideration. Number one, defer action, don't make any decision. We really would like at least consideration for the next 30 days before the next select board meeting. So we can look at alternative routes that may be working with the planning department. We've looked at a couple of different options and we don't know if it's feasible yet, but at least we'd like to bring it to the table and talk to National Grid. We would like to include or actually open discussions with other boards, such as the Historical Commission. Obviously, we're dealing with historical downtown. Anything that we do is drastically going to affect the future, tourism, and the vitality of the town. So different boards have different inputs that maybe National Grid isn't necessarily thinking about, but it might be too late, but it would definitely be still time to consider all options. We would like National Grid to maybe give serious consideration to any kind of smart meters and how that might affect any kind of power outages by reducing the level of service in power emergencies. And also, obviously, long-term solutions for the infrastructure, underground utilities, climate resilience, and working with a comprehensive integrated infrastructure refreshment plan to guide the town in the future, incorporate strategies to protect and the challenges against climate change in the foreseeable future, and provide a framework for cost-efficient implementation rather than piecemeal action. Now, that being said, some of the ideas were brought up. Christy had said about the underground and maybe going to above ground. There was discussion about the sidewalk. Can we put anything under the sidewalk? There were also issues where I think we talked about 4 poles being in the way of the ADA compliant 36-inch passway. Maybe there's a combination of all these things that we might be able to take down those 3 troublesome poles and just do the underground service there, maybe opening up the sidewalk for that part and then go above ground too. What we're looking at is just different alternatives and open discussion, because just going one way or the other way, there might be a couple of little flexible ideas out there that we just haven't talked to, because we have planners and engineers that are not necessarily familiar with the island and they're making a plan. And I understand it's been over 2 years, but the engineering plans and costs that had taken place we haven't necessarily approved or been consulted about or asked for discussion. We know it's a complex situation and what it's going to take to do this, but I think right now we're at that point where if we don't talk about things before we just put this on, just these cables into place, we might have a little remorse later on. And also, while we're doing this, implement or discuss the comprehensive master plan at the end of the year that maybe will tie into this above ground cable. Rita brings up a couple of points too with the future feeders. If we're looking at in 10 years, and we're being asked to add another feeder, at that point, there's been discussion about a 3rd cable underground or undersea. Is there, if we have to add another feeder, does that require another substation? If we're going to add a substation, is there another alternative with a 3rd cable to come through undersea? And is it possible, and this is an engineering question, to come through instead of through Moores, maybe go to the eastern end of the island and create a substation out there that would handle that portion of the island, and then maybe that would alleviate some of the strain and load on the other parts of the island to the west of that. So it's just another thought. And the lifespan of the poles. If we're looking at the extra 3 inches adding onto the diameter of the pole and the extra 5 feet, what's the lifespan of these poles? Are they going to be 40 years? And if they're going to be 40 years, what we're really looking at is a temporary fix. But I think we all know that in 40 years, there's no really need to address the pole issue or underground because they're perfectly fine over the next 40 years and it becomes a financial issue. And I don't think we're really going to be addressing that because it's in place, it works. Let's not go to the next step of the underground. And then everything else gets, I guess, grouped into that where we're looking at Verizon and Comcast and then the sewer, where we have the opportunity right now to incorporate all these departments and work together to see how we can make this underground. We look at the streets and the alternative routes, 28 feet wide street, a 14-foot wide street, looking at the vaults that are 14 by 11. Sure, it creates an issue as far as the main line sewer connections, water connections. However, let's explore options for the other alternative streets that are 28 feet wide, where we might be able to put one to the one side, get that vault in there, and then we're going to be updating sewer and water later. That's the other side of the 14 feet that we use to address that. 10 feet is a very deep hole. But I think I'm going to reiterate what Matt said with the sidewalks. Maybe we don't have to, we can utilize the sidewalks and maybe go down to 3 feet for that. I know I'm rambling, but this, it wasn't a question and answer because I think if we had that kind of presentation, we would be able to ask the questions as the presentation is being made. And I don't want to sound ungrateful or ungrateful, but I think the open discussion is great, but I think answering or asking a question and only to have it proven wrong is actually a good thing because it gets the question out of the way and we were able to move on. So right now, a nice discussion had taken place, but there's still a lot of questions to be had. And I just want to say thank you very much.
So I have a question for you. In the beginning, you were saying you're asking for 30 days so the planning board can look at, you're looking to decide if you want the L8 feeder to go underground or if you want everything to go underground.
No,
I'm trying
not all or nothing. I think what we're looking to do for the 30 days is explore the other options that we've started to explore, other alternative routes, and just make a presentation to see that it's even viable or it's possible.
Alternative routes for what? Just the L8?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Just the L8.
Okay.
Yes.
And John, with some of those alternative routes, you feel that there are routes that what would make them better?
Well, not necessarily better, but you know, there are some side streets that we may, instead of going down one road, be able to put a main road down where we can get underground service, and then the side streets maybe get the above ground or vice versa, so that we're eliminating some of the poles. And that's a combination that I just heard is not necessarily what National Grid was looking at, but that was one of our questions before it was just asked and answered.
It does sound like, though, and I could be wrong with some of those side streets, if there's other wires on those side streets, that those aren't going to go underground, so the poles would remain.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily solve the pole issue. Just
No, and that's just one thing that we were exploring, just looking at into alternative routes. Not necessarily it's the best, but the question was again asked, answered, and it was today. But there are 10 other questions, and from other people as well, and I'm sure from the audience.
And so what you were really considering is that the better route would be the one that could get as much underground as possible.
We'd like to think that. I think the Historical Commission would like to think that is a better. And we're looking at 50 years from now. If we had looked at underground cables 50 years ago, I don't know if the technology was there, we wouldn't be in this situation. I think whatever we're looking to do over the next 10 years, in 10 years, we're going to be sitting at the same table here and saying, why didn't we look at the 20-year, 30-year, 40-year plan? So right now, we are definitely adding beefier poles. That's not the 40-year plan that we're looking at for the historical significance of the town and the aesthetics of it. which is really our livelihood also.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, and something to keep in mind, the underground cables in areas prone to flooding and future flooding then would have those very visible transformers. So it would be great to have the historical boards looking at that conflict between underground history and coastal resiliency.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And we're not taking a vote on anything tonight. We don't actually have the utility petitions before us. This is an update on the scope of the project.
I just wanted to point out and kind of reiterate what John just said, is the importance of, if this moves forward and we put the new poles in, we want commitment from National Grid to still be willing to go underground if this is kind of a comprehensive plan from the town. I don't want to hear, oh, we just put new poles in, so we don't want to go that route. So I just kind of want to reiterate that point. That I think it was a really great point, John. Thank you.
Campbell Sutton, and so I thought this was really, I was at the last presentation, I thought this was really interesting presentation. I happened to like the coring that he had, and it just sort of made me wonder if you can do a horizontal drill, maybe we could get away from a pole discussion entirely and take the alternate route that was going under the harbor, right? With that kind of a coring, and you go under the harbor, and the land bank has the Hayes property. And so you go under and you come up and you sort of pop up at the rotary there, just as a different way to think about the system. I know it's expensive, but I think it's a shorter distance than, you know, sort of zigzagging through town and trying to hit all that infrastructure and all of those questions, and maybe it would take less permitting. And because one of the things I was thinking is that, you know, part of the mitigation for the town is one of the top 3 recommendations is to get all your utilities underground. So it seems like this is not just a question of, well, what do you want to do? It's part of the hazard mitigation for the future for the island. And this seems like a great opportunity to start actually incorporating that with these issues, because I think that's an issue for Comcast. It's an issue for Verizon as well, because that's part of their responsibility in helping the community meet its, you know, future hazard situation. If I didn't get too confusing there, sorry. But anyway, that's my thought.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Hillary Raport, and I'm the chair of the Nantucket Historical Commission. The Historical Commission was created in 2005 to complement the Historic District Commission. It's recently been reappointed, and I imagine there are people listening who don't really know what the difference is between the Historical Commission and the HDC. So before I make my comment, I just want to briefly and quickly say what we are. The Historical Commission is responsible for the the HDC is responsible for design review and permitting. The Historical Commission is responsible for protecting the historic colonial American and Native American assets of Nantucket. And we review policies and we propose new policies and practices that will protect our historic town, our landscape, and our artifacts in the near and longer term. So as has been mentioned, this is issue of the wires, the visibility, the accessibility, the streetscape. It's an important issue for Nantucket, and it's an important issue for the Nantucket Historical Commission. I just wanted to make a statement about a big vision for Nantucket and historic Nantucket. And I think that big vision includes doing everything we can to get wires underground. I know this select board feels the same way, and it's just really a challenge to figure out how to do it. So I wanted to focus a little bit on the bigger vision and the timeline and this question of L8. We've heard in the past, well, we do need to put wires underground. We have a bylaw to put wires underground, but now is not the time. And I would just like to push back a little bit on that, because I've heard Joe Cardinal say that when they came to us in, I think it was May of 2018, there was a proposal to put the wires underground. I believe at that time, I've seen in minutes that National Grid thought it would cost about $5 million. We think that's no longer an accurate estimate, but I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that at that time, National Grid said that they were willing to absorb the cost of undergrounding wires at that rate, because they wanted to get LA done and they wanted to do the right thing for Nantucket and they cared about Nantucket. I think that we do have negotiating leverage at this point, and I think that it is a burden for our community to have to put up with the pole swaps and the 45-foot poles that will potentially never go away if we put LA overground right now. So while it seems like, okay, let's see if we can make things incrementally better, take out the most offending ADA incompliant large poles, if we actually do it, it's a capitulation, and it is giving up on a potential negotiating opportunity that will advantage taxpayers and ratepayers on Nantucket. So I know we can't be irresponsible. We don't want power outages. I did some quick math. It seems like at a 3% growth rate, we do have a few years before we really start to have problems. Nobody knows what will happen on super hot days. But it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, that we may have a few years of capacity on our current lines. And we do have a negotiating opportunity, and we do have a chance to maybe take a break. And I don't mean a 30-day break, I mean a big break, to make a big vision. I know a lot of people who care about this issue who are in this room now remember that in 1982, Nantucket officials and voters put in place a utility surcharge to pay for undergrounding wires in portions of the historic core of Nantucket town and in Sconset. This work was actually not completed until 1993. I know a lot of people remember that. It came after years of constructing roads downtown. This construction of the roads was often disorganized. People were really upset. It was very disruptive. That all happened in the mid-'80s. It was very expensive. It included visionary projects like putting more cobblestones on India Street. We cobbled India Street. We cobbled South Water Street during that time. But even after going through all of this, the people in Nantucket still had the stomach to go through yet another project to put the power lines underneath the sidewalks on Upper Main Street and in Main Street Square. And they did that for no productive purpose other than the beauty of Nantucket. There was no infrastructure project. It wasn't a feeder line. It was just that they wanted to see the architectural splendor of Main Street Square without wires all over it. And today we have given an incredible gift to the visitors and the residents of Nantucket, because they can go, you may have to go at 5 in the morning, I do it sometimes, to see Main Street Square uncluttered by wires, and it is absolutely uplifting to the spirit. So I think we have an opportunity, and I really exhort this select board, and I can tell from the discussion and the studies and the engineering that there is a commitment here to look for that big vision. I hope we have the time. I think we do have the time, and I want to thank you for listening to us, and I hope that we can work together to do this. Thank you.
If no one else is going to talk, I might as well say something. Thank you all, Nat Lowell, Planning Commission, Planning Board, et cetera, et cetera. Listening to you guys, thank you all for coming again. I don't know where you're staying, but thank you for coming. Up in North Conway, I go up there 3 times a year, and I look at the ground. I look at everything. They're moving all the poles out of the sidewalks up there. Don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. It's pretty cool. And I did a little video of Gardner Street saying, why can't all these poles be like the one in that private property on the left after number 18 is on their land. Now, it's on their land from back in the day. I understand that. But I realize this is really, really complicated, and Everybody has their own opinion of everything should just go underground. We put the cables in under the ocean. We were never going to have a cable from the mainland. We were going to have natural gas from Algonquin before the cable came, and now all of a sudden we got 2 cables. So anything is possible, okay? Boat used to be in the Bedford. Anything is possible. But reality is today's dollar is not the same as it was when we had our free sewer in 1890, our free water in 1890, and all the other free stuff we had, town gas, everything else. So here we are with poles in the sidewalks with 1799 layouts, you know, variable width. We've got a guy downtown with flower pots in the sidewalk and we can't move them, okay, because he owns the sidewalk. We got to start writing checks to move poles, in my opinion. Get easements, eminent domain, move these telephone poles, because if they were out of the sidewalk and on the edge of these properties, we wouldn't even be talking about this. You'd just be like figuring out where we're going to put it. The most important thing is that at least we're off the Pleasant Street insanity and we're down in an area that makes sense to figure out. We have to, as John talked about, we have got to, that 36 inches is embarrassing. I want it to be 50. I want it to be really a sidewalk, okay? But in reality, this is what we have, okay? And when we hear you talk about Comcast and Verizon, you have to be older to remember the Bell telephone and all the crazy stuff that went on, whenever it even happened. And I know you're all in a weird situation with all that, but I kind of thought that it was all going to kind of happen together. When you talk about going underground, I mean, I didn't know we were going to put this gigantic vault for somebody else to figure out their stuff. I just kind of figured it would just happen, but I guess that's not the case. And I understand that things are complicated, but we're simple people over here that just think that this can happen. And I think it can too, but I think we really got to look at moving poles in some of these areas if we're all going to really get this to happen in our lifetime, because I'll tell you right now, this is a huge undertaking. It's not going to go away. There's going to be more electricity, everybody. We're not going to have solar panels to make us go backwards because the state is pushing more electric, just so you know. Lauren will tell you that. The state is giving heat pumps away. They're giving hot water heaters with heat pumps on the top of them away right now. They're giving them away. They're writing checks for you to put electric in. So we're not going to go in reverse electricity because of all the new way of thinking that's happening. Until we get through that, well, maybe we'll go back to normal in 20 years. But right now, that's what we're at. So there's going to be a third cable at some point because of just the natural progression of the way things are. So, and I work for the gas company. I understand what's going on with all this. It's amazing. So at the same time, though, when I drive down Gardner Street, we've tried to put a bike path to Orange Street for about probably 25 years, 30 years now, just like this feeder thing. We've tried to get a feeder for bicycles, and we can't do it. For a lot of the same reasons that you're having the same problems. How are we going to do this? Marine Lumber's poles are in the sidewalk. Well, then we don't own this land. Oh, this is we got all these problems, and it's taken us my adult life to get a bike path to the Milestone Rotary, and we still don't have one yet. Okay? So I just think that we need to consider the private property issue and moving these poles. Prospect Street, it should have already happened. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for helping us.
Chair, I have a question for you. If we were to, just hypothetically, say, all right, we want the L8 project to go underground, just the L8 feeder, and they find a way, we put it underground, is that going to be more complicated, more costly 10 years from now when we figure out how to put everything underground?
Including the existing poles?
Yes,
and
everything.
Yeah, I think so.
Does it make more sense to, if we all agree here, like, all right, 10 years, we're going to have everything underground in this area. If we want to do that, does it make sense to keep the L8, whatever route we end up choosing, or the best way, above ground?
I think it makes sense to put it above ground now and plan for the underground later. If there's an appetite to do it in 10 years, then you could address all your other utilities at the same time.
Right, or 5 years, or whatever it is.
The question is, how do we as a community, how do we as a board or a staff have the urgency to put that high enough on the stack that it's dealt with? I mean, that's the issue. It's very, like, it's complicated, and it's just there's a lot of things you have to do. It's not complicated as in hard complicated. It's hard and you have to talk to a lot of different people, and you've got a lot of engineering and a lot of measuring, but it's not, but how do we keep that on the front burner so that all those things get done? And how do we bring the various parties together so they're doing them together? Because part of why we don't see any more undergrounding is because, they're not doing it, and we're waiting on Verizon, we're waiting on Comcast. We did our share, it's someone else's. We've studied this, multiple times, and there has to be a better way to organize it.
Well, if I may, I think that that's part of what this discussion is about, for us to decide as a community, is this a top priority over other very large, expensive projects? Because what we do need to put together is the entire scope and the entire cost and the entire timeline. And this is probably an override question for town meeting, because it's going to be significant, somewhere in the potential $50 million range to underground this entire section. Maybe that was just with the drilling.
The tunneling obviously adds quite a bit, but I think what makes sense to get all the stakeholders in the room together, plan it for a year or two, including Grid and Verizon and water and the sewer department, and see exactly what's the plan for the future, and then plan it and then get it into motion.
And what I heard at the meeting is that Verizon and Comcast will definitely be our cost to bear to underground those. We'll have to get them to do it, but we will have to pay for the the path for them to do it, the ductwork for them to do it.
Well, one of the issues always is National Grid makes a lot more money, so we collect more from them. The other two don't bring as much money, and then bringing in less, so that was going at a slower pace. I think you can bypass that by, floating some sort of bond and making them all go at the same pace. And so it still could be a surcharge. It just will take longer to pay those two off, and we bond it and pay the difference. Our rates are really good right now. Rates are low. If we want to do it as a community, the finances shouldn't be a constraint. If it's within a reasonable amount that the community is willing to pay. But the fact that one company makes less money as a percentage of the other company, we should be able to figure that out. That's a math equation.
And we do already have some money that was approved for sewer work. $6 million?
That was the estimate, yep.
Is the scope of this project much bigger than the other feeder projects, or why is this one so much more sort of under the microscope? Because I think National Grid said that past ones you didn't have any sort of public process like this.
So the reason why we're having this, in my opinion and from internal discussion, is because we initiated this on the ground. And we contacted everybody, and everybody's aware of it. If it was initially overhead, it wouldn't even, I don't think we'd be talking here, because we have the rights to upgrade our poles and upgrade our wires, and we do it every day. We have a whole line department working on poles every day. If you drive by them, that's what they do, full time. So we've done many projects on the island. Nobody even comes here. We're replacing existing poles. We come here for new locations, new crossings, anything brand new, but existing, we don't. And the reason why we're here is because we started underground. Otherwise, we would not be here. And the routes that many people discuss, we internally reviewed the route many times. And the route that we picked is the route that benefits our reliability the best. We don't want to change any routes because we need to support the corners, the 90-degree corners now, without having to ask private property rights for easements to put anchors and support and new pole locations. Or we don't want to have 3 feeders on one pole. So that's why we zigzag our way out to avoid having multiple feeders on the same pole for reliability issues. A truck comes and hit a pole, there's 3 feeders out, huge section of the island is out. So we zigzag away to put 1 feeder on a pole, maybe 2, not 3. So the route is not flexible, and relocating poles is also not something we want to do. That's why we want to replace existing poles, so we don't have to get new rights for the poles and delay the whole process. I hope we made it clear that we need this thing now for next year, for the peak of the summer. So that's why the plan is to replace existing poles, upgrade the wires, get this feeder on the ground, and support the town with the desire, because it's very clear here from the public, there is a desire to remove these poles and make sidewalks. I think we would love to sit down with you guys and work that out. That's gonna take years, like you said, and a lot of money. But in terms of replacing existing facilities, we wouldn't even be here. We don't have to request rights to replace existing poles. As far as I know, maybe the lawyer's gonna pinch me after. But just to clarify that, I think it's a courtesy. We're hoping to not have to relocate poles, because then it's a brand new petition. Everyone's gonna hear it, and the same story is gonna happen. Move this here, move that there, let's make it underground. We don't wanna deal with that. We wanna replace the poles, make them standard. They're class 4 poles now, they're skinny. We don't have those classes anymore. We only have class 1s and class 2s for the island because of the wind. And unfortunately, they're a little thicker, and that's where the ADA compliance comes in on those sidewalks. And when you touch the poles, now we have to look at that. So our goal is to clarify those 3 pole locations, get a game plan, and then work under our rights to replace and upgrade our existing facilities without asking for new grants, because we're not putting anything new. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. No,
okay.
Definitely.
But we have other projects that happens all the time, like the Liberty and Garden Street. We just replaced it. It's our existing poles. We just put new poles up, and we did it. And we have all the projects coming up. Till we have to upgrade our lines. They're too small, they're too old. That's part of our budget to keep working, replacing lines and keep the reliability going. We do that all the time. So the reason we're here is an opportunity for everybody to speak, to show you guys. I guess it's a huge opportunity to go and put money into the underground facilities. So.
Thank you.
This is, to me, 2 separate categories, projects, 2 separate buckets. It's L8, how do we make that the most efficient so everybody understands it? Things that John was asking, and then the bigger project, and the political will and the financial will to put it all underground, which I think everybody wants to, but they're 2 separate. And they're slightly connected. But moving forward with L8, making it as efficient as possible, and then also moving forward with the bigger picture. Am I thinking that right?
Yeah, I would agree.
No.
And no, I would agree. And I think that there are several good points brought up tonight. I think that the idea of this bigger picture, bigger vision, everything that is involved strikes me as that's where we need communication between the boards. We need to really understand, we need to have that plan for all of these utilities to be done in the right order, in the right place. And I think it would be expensive, and I think we would be kicking ourselves if we did this piecemeal, only have to go and dig it up later on. And I think, though, there does need to be a focus put on this, because this is a lot of figuring things out in a long-term project. And I absolutely hear the comments on the beauty of Nantucket without poles. The numbers I think are a little bit concerning in terms of putting some of our critical infrastructure under pressure in the short term. And I think it would be money and time better spent looking at how do we get everything underground, everything at once, and not piecemeal. And I think lastly, the other elephant in the room for me is just not having a concurrent conversation about continued reduction and conservation of energy. I think with the growth rate that we have currently, trying to support that with the infrastructure that we have, I think we really need to do even more than what we're already doing. We have some fantastic programs. We're working towards green communities, but we have to seriously address the usage that we currently have from the sources that we currently have, in addition to what is going to be coming in the future with switching to electric vehicles, electric cars, all the landscaping equipment, heating, all these future sources of electrical usage. I think we really need to look at ways that we can reduce, or else we're going to continually be upgrading these things. So that's where I'm at.
The other thing I'd like to add is that as we look at undergrounding, I think that we need to look at it comprehensively beyond this proposed route for L8, because there may be streets like Gardner Street, for example, that is a nightmare, where that might be a higher priority to put those wires underground or somewhere else. I'm just using that as an example because it's terrible right now with the double poles and everyone driving up on the sidewalk because they can't get around each other.
I think that too really speaks to that need for assessing all of the poles, not just this line and this feeder. And I think as our strategic plan evolves, there's a certain element of this that really does fall under the sidewalk accessibility. And I think that might be one initial way to look at it and see how that works, but I think we need to look at it as an island-wide plan.
Or particularly an old historic district. Prioritization and in conjunction to where the sewer lines need to be replaced the most, so that we can come up with proposals of how to best use the financial resources that are going to be required.
Is there currently an internal work group looking at this, or this is something that we'd have to create?
I mean, is this something we're talking about starting in a more comprehensive way? I mean, people have been looking at this in regard to this project, but there's a lot more work to be done.
I don't know exactly what is being asked, but if we're talking about putting all wires underground and having it be a comprehensive project with the town's infrastructure, then possibly one way to start is to seek funding at the next town meeting for some kind of a project manager, engineering firm to look at the design of how undergrounding the utilities would occur in conjunction with the replacement and the alignment where it makes sense of sewer, water, stormwater, what the routes would be, what areas we're talking about, what impacts there would be on sidewalks, trees, roadways, making sidewalks bigger, is private property needing to be taken. There's probably, there's a lot of things that would have to be done with this. The surveys that we talked about, there's probably many encroachments along the area, so they would all have to be removed. We'd need a construction estimate. So I'm not really sure how much we're talking about for this, because I'm not sure exactly if we know where we're talking about. If we're talking about L8, that's one thing, that route for, I don't know, that going forward, or other, if we're talking about the whole downtown or examining other routes.
I mean, that might be something the Historical Commission could weigh in on in terms of prioritizing where wires should go under first.
And some of it might be driven by where our main infrastructure is going to change. You know, if we're going to be putting main infrastructure for the sewer, for example, from downtown out of town, that, common sense tells you that you open that road, you do everything then, and you find a way to make the room in it, and you find a way to work with these guys to make everyone, do the project when the project's being done, and you close the road, and we don't deal with it again for 30 years, hopefully, other than connections.
I will say that we have been looking at joint projects between sewer, water, and DPW going forward, and we already have some planned, but we didn't totally incorporate thinking about undergrounding wires as we went. And I don't think we'll really know where the sewer is going to lead us until we get the final CMOM study. So I think we're waiting on that, aren't we?
Yeah, there are some other things underway, but that's what I meant by aligning the infrastructure with.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's not just a historical issue; it might be an opportunity issue. If we don't, and we've gotten a lot better. 25 years ago, we'd do a road and tear it up, and someone would do something, and a year or two later, 5 years ago, sorry, I was being nicer, but and then a couple years later, you do this. We're doing the same road again and tarring it all over again. And so how do we get ourselves, so that when we have an opportunity, we do it? That's what I would like to see.
But you could still have a prioritization of, from a historic standpoint, from a viewscape standpoint, what are the most important streets and then align them with when
Exactly.
other work is happening.
Yes.
So you're putting the different pieces of the puzzle together, and you're getting the duct bank put in when you're doing the sewer line and the water line. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, we're definitely going to need more resources for that. So be prepared.
Well, that's why we're talking about it now, because April's not far away. It's a major, major undertaking. But I mean, what I'm hearing, and I think Jason asked the right question, is it better to do L8 underground or to overhead it and do it all together? And I think our answer was that
The answer was to, just because of the time to put it underground is, you're probably looking, even if it's feasible, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 years of construction.
Just L8.
to just
L8,
put L8 underground, and that doesn't take any of the other wires or the poles
Correct.
out of the way. And it's reconstruction of road and sidewalk to do that,
Right.
potentially.
And then we might do it again 5-10 years from now when we put everything underground.
Or the other option was to just temporarily put it overhead, and then with the thought that you're gonna come back and do it the underground route. Plan it right.
We just want to make sure that National Grid's on board with getting them all underground.
And when you say on board, what actually do you mean?
Well, I mean, starting with, if you're saving $3 million, then we can bank that to the side for when these go underground. Something along those lines.
Unfortunately, we can't do that because the money went back into the budget that we were originally planning for this job. And again, it's just, we have to be cognizant of all the ratepayers, and we can't get approval for the projects. We can't go to the DPU and say, Nantucket's not ready for us, but they want us to spend another $3 million in a couple of years. It won't be approved. There's no way that we could get approval for that. But I mean, we're willing to work with you as much as we possibly can. We understand there's an issue. That's why we originally wanted to do this underground. And then after we had a chance to sit with Erica and Libby and Rob and David and Mark and explain the difficulties of what you have existing underground now, we realize that, okay, this would be an issue for us to put in a 12-way duct bank, these big manholes, and then cover the ground up and go away, leave the wires overhead, leave the existing wires overhead, and put the L8 Express in the ground and then go away. And then in a few years, when the town is ready to do your work, then it's going to be an issue of, have we taken up too much of the street when we put in our system. So that's why we decided, okay, after being told that we had to wait, so we've got to do the overhead. And I think the other thing to mention is, and I know you had talked about energy efficiency, and basically that's what we're doing over at the Bunker Road, the battery storage and the new generators and the roll-ons that we have. We are extending the life of the potential of a third cable for as long as possible. We've projected it out to be around 2040 now before we would have to do that, and we are spending $77 million in Bunker Road that is being paid for by all ratepayers, Massachusetts electric ratepayers, to bring more energy efficiency and bring those units to the island so that we can push off a new cable, which becomes the cost of the ratepayers on Nantucket when an underground sea cable is installed. So we are involved, we are helping, we want to be there, and we'll certainly help. Again, a lot of the engineering is done for the underground. If you were to go with that route, we wouldn't have to do that, and then we certainly will assist as much as we possibly can.
Is there any other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
We're we're not done yet.
Oh, you guys are okay.
No, you guys are done. Yes,
You're
you
done.
can go. Libby, you're up for your monthly report.
I can be.
Oh, do I need to have the meetings adjourned? I'm sorry about that. They need to adjourn their meetings. Did Hillary still there? Sorry, technicality.
I'll accept the motion to adjourn the planning commission meeting. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Planning board make a motion to adjourn. Nat? Nat?
Yes, so moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this can be sort of quick. I've just got some highlights of things town administration has been working on. Most recently, coastal resiliency plan. We have a draft that is in process of internal review, and it's as soon as that is completed, the plan is to turn it over to the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. And actually, their first meeting was yesterday. So, but I don't exactly know what happened because I haven't even hardly turned my computer on. Meetings, got a lot of meetings going on with housing discussions, specifically town employee housing, the board strategic plan goals. We did, some of us did a tour of Richmond recently to take a look at the status and hear about their upcoming progress and plans. We had the waste summit, solid waste summit on July 11th. We've got some follow-up informational sessions that are scheduled throughout the rest of 2019, and we have an internal group that's really seriously looking at options after 2025 when the waste options contract expires and other waste stream issues that are being looked at now. We're just starting the fiscal 21 budget and capital planning processes. We're working on the implementation for the plastics ban, as I mentioned earlier. We're starting to get 2020 annual town meeting initial prep underway. The Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust Finance Director and I are participating in those meetings, so we're just pretty much listening to what's happening there routinely. We had a mid-season beach meeting recently. There's a lot of seasonal meetings that are going on right now. Some of you have probably been to them, and as well as I have and some of the department heads. The assistant town manager and I recently attended a Cape Cod managers meeting in Harwich. Good thing we did that then and not soon. We have a lot of projects underway, the harbor master building design, the old fire station reuse, the senior center, all these items that are listed here. There's probably more, but these are the ones that we most recently have been working on. And we are working to fill the assistant town manager for administration. That's the second assistant town manager position. We're hoping to wrap that up very soon within the next couple of weeks. The coastal resiliency coordinator actually has been filled. It's being filled with Vincent Murphy, who is currently working at Natural Resources, so he will become the Coastal Resiliency Coordinator. I don't know what that means. And we are preparing for upcoming collective bargaining for the union contracts that are expiring June 30th, 2020. You all have been involved in an initial discussion about that. We're getting departments together to start coordinating what all of the various contracts might be shaping up for in terms of proposals, and we will be meeting with you again. This is not yet scheduled, sometime probably in September. So those are just some things happening.
Quick question, Libby. The strategic plan, we met and we add another area, and we have the sustainability kind of statement umbrella. And when I explain this to people, they get really excited and very interested kind of how it's evolving and how anything to show. Is that coming out in a couple months? Will Novak, is it putting it all together?
Well, you are, as you know, having a workshop meeting next Wednesday, and presumably or potentially you will adopt a
Finalize it,
revised plan, an updated plan, and then town admin will take on the internal work to develop implementation planning and progress reports and things like that.
So in the fall, we'll have something to push out to the public.
Yeah, you
Document.
yeah, I think you'll have a document sooner than that. I
Okay.
think we were kind of thinking that if you all are ready to finish it off next Wednesday with what you already talked about a month or so ago, you could potentially adopt it. We could maybe ratify it at your next meeting on August 7th. And Novak Group can, sort of polish it,
together.
like they did last time, and then we can put that out, and then we'll just make regular progress updates as we go after that.
Thanks.
Kind of like we've been doing.
Okay. Committee reports?
I've got one from last night. I was asked to moderate just as me, not as a select board member, the Let's Talk, the ASAP held on cannabis. And it was a really, really good education for everybody. It was a representative from Fairwinds, Addiction Solutions, the manager of the social services for the hospital. Gray Lady was here, Nicole Campbell was on the panel, and then Sue from ASAP. So that was the panel, and maybe 60 people here having a discussion, and it was everything from drug policy from the 1930s to handing around the packaging and seeing if adults could get through the packaging on a first try. And I think it was very educational. It was just a really good conversation from the other marijuana forums that we've had here. That was very, confusion and a little bit of anger and a little more tension. There really wasn't there. It was very insightful for regardless of what side you were on. And Christy was there too. I don't know if you had any comments on it. No.
No, I just kind of agreed that it was really constructive feedback, and I didn't feel like it was one side or the other, but very much an overview. And I really liked the historical piece of it. I think that really gave it a new flavor.
Yep. And I think one of the big takeaways for me, and I had 3 of my staff there, and I got to talk to them for 2 hours afterwards. They were very interested just about the staying educated and getting parents and everybody to continue to talk about it and not be scared of it. And there's a lot of clinical and statistics saying the more you talk about it, then the better it's more functioning in the community, easier to prevent and less abuse, and so it was good.
Board of Health, we had a discussion or an update on Lyme's, a number of Lyme's cases, and it was interesting. There was a feeling that the numbers that we had were low, and it has to do with underreporting because it involves a lot of paperwork for doctors to report, so they often don't. And I think the cases were for the last year were in and around 27 or 30. 2 or 3 years ago, when there was an intern there who was tracking all the cases down and getting the paperwork and working with doctors, we had 400 cases. So there was discussion about having an intern again next year to do the same thing and maybe make it something that can be updated regularly. And this being important, obviously, for public health, but also I think this is going to be important information to have if the conversation around the genetically modified mice comes up again from MIT. Understanding the scope and the extent of Lyme's on Nantucket, I think, will be really important.
I have a lot of updates.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you want to go first?
You can go. I always want to.
Having a meeting every 2 weeks, I feel like also the newbie. I'm involved in a lot of things. But Libby kind of touched on a lot of things. So we had our first landfill public waste summit. That was last Thursday. And then we have a couple more scheduled throughout the month. There's going to be one a month through December. And I thought it was really helpful to kind of have an overview of our landfill, of our composter. We talked about hauling. We kind of touched on every subject, and then going forward, we're going to go into depth about each of those subjects. So stay up to date through the town's website and social media. We also had a plastics ban work group that's been meeting regularly, and we have our first open session on July 29th, which was at the beginning of the meeting, so you can look back at that. The Neighborhood First program, that was the $20 million approved at town meeting. There's been formed a work group through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and they have completed their committee, and we have our first meeting on Monday. And so I'm very excited I'm the select board rep for that, and I'm very excited to see how this project moves forward. This is from last time that I didn't get to report on. A lot of us attended the Keeping History Above Water, and my takeaway from that was we always kind of talk about how the rising sea level is going to affect our island and our history and things like that. But for the first time, it really talked about the economics and what happens when the value of these homes on the coast go down, and how does that affect our tax base, and then how do we invest in our infrastructure. And that was kind of the first time I heard that, and just kind of want to keep that conversation going and that perspective going. The census, I'm part of the census work group, and we had our first meeting yesterday. That comes out April 2020, so it's not that far away. And we're really looking at the strategies of how to make sure everybody gets counted, the entire population. It was 2 weeks ago when the data platform discussed every missed opportunity is several thousands of dollars of funding that Nantucket loses out on. So we're really working across all different groups. We have a nonprofit rep. There's people from the town, people from different community networks trying to figure out how's the best way, now that it's going to be online, how can we go to people's houses and get them to fill out the form? How do we get them to stop somewhere like the Athenaeum? So I think it's really exciting to be part of this group. Town Government Study Committee has a open session. We're going to have two throughout the summer just to give an update on everything that we've been reviewing for the past 2 years and get public input. So it's next Wednesday, 4:30 to 6:30 in this space. Tucker, yes. And then another one 2 weeks later. So they'll be postings in the newspaper, but I think they'll also be recorded live, and so people will be able to get an update from that. And then the last thing Libby already touched on was that I got to tour the Richmond properties, and even just on that tour, we saw the roof get completed. So they're going up very quickly, and I think it's really going to alleviate some of the housing issues on Nantucket, not solve, but it'll be nice to have some more units. And it did help us get to Safe Harbor, so it was really cool to kind of see that come to fruition. That's all of them.
Woo. You've been busy. I'm feeling guilty now. No, NPDC met a few weeks back. I can't remember much of the meeting. One thing I do remember, John Trudell had brought up his concerns with Easton Street and parking on Easton, and there's gridlock that happens there when there are events, and sometimes it's 45 minutes. Cars don't move in that one section. His solution was, we should be talking about taking parking off of one side. I don't think it has to be that severe. I think if we delineated the width of the parking on both sides and ticketed people who are, wider than that width, I think the flow would still happen, and we could keep those, and we might even encourage some smaller cars in that area and put more cars down there at that time of day. So, but I don't know where that goes. That should probably be be bounced to, park traffic safety or someone and come back. Mike Burns was there. The quick comment on, I went to the, resiliency. I think one of the takeaways is that they were sort of ranking things. They were saying you have to look at it holistically, look at the whole picture, but then we broke out into groups and looked at individual properties. And I think the takeaway we're going to get is that those view sheds or those roads or those individual properties that were especially in the downtown are all important. And so I think what's going to come out of it is how do you, deal with the water that's there, but also how do you stop some of the overwash and some of the other issues that are going to happen downtown. I mean, it's sort of the heart of the island. It's the heart of our economy. And it's our kids are going to still be working on this, but it is a serious issue that's already impacting us. There's more water down at Brant Point and, than there's been. It doesn't go away anymore. So this is happening, already. And one point about the tax base is it doesn't hurt the tax base. This is what I have to keep reminding some of the people out in Sconset, is it just adds a little bit more to everybody else. And so, because it's a levy limit, we could wipe out, half the houses on the island, just means everyone's tax rate would double. So it really, the amount we gather is the same. Now, maybe people's ability to pay is gonna not be there. But, when people say, geez, you lost so much in taxable income, well, no, we didn't. We still collect it. We just collect a little more from everybody else. And so it's kind of interesting that a lot of people don't understand that. And I think one of the people talking about it, I don't think quite understood how it works. Maybe it doesn't work that way where he's from. The other part, today I asked the Stop and Shop, they are collecting plastic and they're collecting, plastic bags and cling film, PVC film. And I asked them, how are they handling it? What they do now is they collect it in various bins, bale it and send it back. And I'm trying to find out, where do they go with that? Is it recycled? Is it landfilled? Is it burned? What happens? And he said he'll find out and get back to me, because it's one of our big issues. I think it's, I've attended the waste summits. I'm working to try to figure out how to implement some of the plans in my business, and it's not necessarily easy. And I have tons of space to do it, where a lot of people don't. And so, I'm figuring that out. But the question really is going to come down to, how do we handle the various types of plastics? And you can't get away from it. It's going to take a lot of manual sorting somehow. There's no amount, Reed and I have had these conversations, there's no amount of, public relations and education or whatever that's going to get it done. That's 10 or 20% of this issue. 80% is going to be just grunt hard work. And if we aren't willing to hire people and set up to do that, then we are not going to succeed. And so I think that's why some of the meetings we're having are really good, because it's making us sort of talk about what you need and et cetera. And my other point was, I think I wanted to say this a couple weeks ago. The meeting went too long, but I think we should be meeting more often in the summer if our meetings are going as long as they have been going. We are giving short shift to some very important issues. We don't have time to really fully vet them or to give the people that were here the time it deserves. And I think as a board, if we continue to do this, we need to do 3 weeks, 3 times a month in the summer rather than 2. If we aren't able to, and the other thing I'm finding is things are coming in last minute again. Stuff's coming back in on Wednesday. And it's no offense to you, but how does the public react to something that they don't even have a chance to see because it came in at 2:00 on a Wednesday? So I think, and that's part of this summer schedule. I think if, to do our job well and to serve the town properly, I think we need to really seriously consider that, unless we can get this under control. So that's mine.
I just want to add, we also had the first CRAC meeting, Coastal Resiliency Advisory, and we just reviewed our charge, and we're waiting for that Coastal Resiliency Coordinator to be hired, and then we're meeting in September. But 9 very enthusiastic members, so we're very excited.
Well,
Great.
CAC is meeting in a couple of weeks, so I'll report on that later.
We do have a meeting with the architects for the Island Home tomorrow morning, so that should be informative, and we'll be bringing that to a board meeting, I believe in September, to really evaluate. And the CPC is coming up to our application deadline in middle of September. Second Friday in September for historic preservation projects, open space projects, and housing projects. So there's still time to get your application in for that. And then we start our lengthy review process over the couple of months after that. And we've been having these little SIP meetings to talk about improvements to how we evaluate capital requests that come in out of sequence, like whether it's citizens articles or whether things that come in last minute that are worthy of our attention and consideration, and just how to make that process a little bit better. Those have been really productive. We just had our second meeting.
Yeah, that was Capcom, Select Board, and FinCom. Like a couple representatives from each. It was very productive.
That's what I have for now.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.